Hey guys, tonight we tiptoe into Rome before the sun decides what kind of gold to be. When rooftops in the suburbs steam away last night's cooking fires and shutters blink like sleepy eyes, you're under a wool blanket that weighs as much as your ambitions, and somewhere in the courtyard a fountain talks to itself. You probably won't survive this, at least, not without yawning so hard a lictor could use it as a doorway, because we're going to follow a Roman senator through a very, very ordinary day. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing this sleepy little empire we've built across time zones. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake to the scrape of sandals on stone, a household slave sliding the shutters, another setting a brazier to coax the room out of cool night. Your first view is a square of sky bruised purple over the Suburra, the neighborhood that never learned to whisper. Historians still argue whether senators actually kept houses. Here many preferred the Palatine's breezes, but families, like Caesar's, have Suburra stories. And you, for tonight, claim one of the taller domas that peaks above the insulae and their argumentative laundry. You swing your feet to the mosaic col tesserae, little planets under Tosand. A boy brings the tunic laticalvita, the one with the broad purple stripe that says senatus, without needing to shout. Breakfast can wait. First you stand at the lararium, the household shrine, a dish of incense, a small bronze of the Lares, maybe a portrait on waxed board with eyes that remember too much. You breathe, offer a crumb of yesterday's bread, and say the names that keep the house behaving. Ancestors, the hearth, Fortuna, if she's listening. Mainstream fact moves in and nods. Most Roman houses kept such a shrine, and even the busiest big man day usually started with a little smoke and a very practical hello to the gods. Now the fabric math begins. A valet unrolls the toga like a weather system and helps you climb into it. The wool whispers down your arm in measured folds. The sinus is arranged to look accidental. The umbo is teased into a puff that will, later, have a personal grudge against doorways. Quirky tidbit for your dressing room: those senatorial shoes, the calce with 4 straps, often carried a tiny crescent-shaped ornament, a lunula, that peeped like a shy moon at your ankle. Suggestion: do not try to tie them yourself unless your plan for the morning includes creative swearing. Where is my nomenclator? You ask the human contact list with perfect recall, because Rome is a city of faces, and the day will be one long handshake. He appears predictably, at the exact moment you forget which Marcus is the one with the marble contract and which Marcus is the one with the lawsuit. He will pad behind you later, whispering names into your ear like a living caption. Joke 1 sidles in. Somewhere, many centuries ahead, a smartphone gets its feelings hurt. From the peristyle the steward murmurs updates while you sip watered wine and nibbled bread dipped in honey. A client from Tiber is early. The grain factor sent a boy with figures. Your sister's husband's cousin, one of those, has a rumor about a tribune in a veto. You nod, refile, nod again. The city itself is waking. Wheel grooves already cry in the paving. Mule bells count slow minutes, and a vendor of hot chickpeas rehearses his voice until it becomes the street's heartbeat. Property list, you ask, and a wax tablet appears. Since Augustus, senators are expected to maintain a fortune of 1,000,000 sesterces. Mainstream fact again. The kind that shapes breakfast, and you check the line that tallies rents from Sicily and the status of a loan to a nervous equestrian who swears his ships will arrive any second. You mark a dot with your stylus and decide to believe him until noon. You walk the atrium once, the way generals walk their lines. The impluvium reflects the square of the sky. In it, you look like a person who owns more decisions than ours. The doorposts are chalked from the fuller's shop, because even senators outsource their whitening. The porter Ostiarius sits with his dog, who is bad at guarding and excellent at morale. You breathe again, not pious, just practical. Rome rewards posture. The salutatio, the morning greeting, puddles into being on your threshold. Clients in tunics of every ambition, each with a little speech, the way people bring salads to potlucks. You'll get to them next section. For now, you perform a quieter ritual, testing your day's voice. In the mirror of polished silver, you practice one sentence in 3 temperatures: warm, for allies; brisk for time thieves; cold for that one senator who can smell indecision like a wolf. Historians still argue whether togas were daily wear, or chiefly theatrical. Any think elites reserved full toga for formal duties and swapped 2 practical cloaks in private. But you've committed to the wool because the Curia Julia is on your calendar, and some costumes make the role behave. Outside, a dawn breeze pushes smoke sideways and lifts your toga's edge in a manner the poets would call auspicious, and you call drafty. You step into your sandals, feel the straps, snug your ankles into duty, and test the little crescent on the shoe with a toe. Still there, still ridiculous. Still a sign you'll be sitting in the first rows if the censors haven't changed the seating chart while you were sleeping. Joke 2 checks your pockets, finds none, and reminds you that the toga is the original pocketless anxiety experience. Whatever you need today will be carried by other humans with better luck. You cross the threshold. Touch the lintel, a habit you swear is superstition, and keep anyway. On the Subura greets you with its laundry flags, its baker's breath, its half-argued jokes thrown from balcony to balcony like soft bread. Your nomenclator leans in with the morning's first reminder. That's Alice, the one who lost a case last month and pretends he didn't. That's Claudia, her father wants a road. That's the questor's freedman with the expensive sandals. You smile in calibrated degrees. A boy tries to sell you a lucky phallus amulet the size of a sparrow. You decline with the gravitas of a person who already has one on the family threshold. Don't we all? Inside your head, you're already mapping the walk to the forum, the path that avoids the mule cart that always jams the Vicus Tuscus, the shortcut past the perfumers where the street smells like 1,000 opinions, the stretch where the paving stones wobble and the toga likes to flirt with puddles. In the atrium, the steward is still murmuring about letters, dispatch from a governor asking for instructions on a boundary dispute, an invitation to dinner that is not a dinner but a job interview, a note from the augur's boy, birds were fine, proceed without panic. You make a final check at the lirarium habit, not compulsion, and a final glance at the wax tablets stacked in the arm of your chair, little black mirrors waiting for dictation at dusk. You won't own today. Rome will rent it to you in 15-minute segments. Joke 3 adjusts your sinus fold like a fussy ant and reminds you to breathe. You can't veto anything if you pass out in your own vestibule. At the door, your clients ripple, stepping back to let you through as if you were a ship and they were the sea. One of them, good guy, bad luck, whispers, a plea you'll hear properly later. Today will be small talk on the way to large talk. You step into the street, and the city squeezes in. Sling of vendors' cries, hiss of a cook's pan, a scribe's reed pen, whispering on wax, a donkey, negotiating with geometry. Historians still argue whether Rome's morning felt more like a market or a march. You decide it's both, with olives. Your feet find the rhythm of the day. Sandal slap, toga sweep, whisper in the left ear, nod to the right. Above you, laundry claims the breeze like small Republican flags. Below you, the stones remember armies. You settle your hand under the toga's fold, the way men do when pretending they just happen to look dignified. And you aim your face toward the forum, where the curious cool shadow waits, and the first agenda item is not the one anyone intends to discuss. You take one last backyard breath of Subura spice and step into the current. Rome picks you up like a river picks up a leaf and moves you along. The vestibule becomes a tide pool of expectations. Cloaks, brush stone, sandals, scuffed in the air gains that faint temps of cold oil and warm breath that every Roman doorway collects by sunrise. Your salutatio has assembled not an army, not a choir, more like a long, murmuring to-do list disguised as humans. The porter keeps his chain low. The dog pretends to be ferocious and then wags at a child who smells like barley. You take your place just inside the threshold, so winelight from the impluvium softens the edges of everyone's hope. It starts with names, your nomenclator, oracle of small truths. leans close and whispers, Gaius of the Divot's blue hands, blue mood. Publius the schoolmaster owes you a favor. Decimus from the Sabine Hills brings cheese and a cousin. Each name arrives like a file opened and a face you didn't know you remembered presents. A little bow and a little speech and a little problem. None of which can be solved in a vestibule, and all of which insist on starting here. Joke 1 pads in politely. You imagine replacing the nomenclator with a tiny bronze statue that just says, "Who's this?" Whenever someone appears. Rome would riot. You greet in layers. Old clients get the right hand. Newer ones get the nod, plus a phrase you copied once from a polished colleague. You honor my threshold. A freedman shows you a crumpled tablet, with a notation cramped in the right margin. A widow holds out a basket wrapped in linen goat cheese from Tivoli, that carries the meadow in its pockets. She doesn't say dowry. She folds her mouth around the word girl. You answer with tomorrow, which in this house is code for I will see who has money and a son. The system is less secret than everyone pretends. Mainstream fact slips its sandal into the room. This morning call was a standard feature of elite life under both Republic and Empire. Clients' visited a patroness for greetings, advice, legal aid, introductions, and sometimes a small ration of food or money. In return, they performed officium attendance, public support, and flattering presence during processions. Some followed the patron in a deductio to the forum like a well-behaved comet. If a senator is a planet, these are the smaller bodies whose gravity still matters. A boy arrives holding a sportula, the basket you'll fill for distribution, and behind him the steward with a small coffer for the cash version. In an older city, the custom was a full cena recta, an actual sit-down meal, somewhere between Nero and Domitian, so the poets swear, the basket became coins and the banquet became arithmetic. Historians still argue whether the shift was sudden or slow, generous or miserly, and whether the sportsla insulted clients or saved them indigestion. You have adopted a hybrid compromise, a few sesterti for the ones who need money now, a wrapped parcel of bread and olives for the ones walking far, and a promise scrawled on wax for the ones whose problems must be solved in rooms with doors. You move the line gently. The schoolmaster wants a letter of recommendation for his nephew to read law with a famous orator who wears his hair with exhausting precision. The brickmaker wants credit extended for one more kill's worth of roof tiles. He swears the rain is a rumor and his clay is patient. A pair of litter bearers from a neighbor senator's house pause to compare notes. Their master's line is longer, their master's mood shorter. Someone tries a joke about sensorial inspections. Everyone laughs, the way people laugh at weather. Quirky tidbit tugs your sleeve. One client, a cunning shoemaker with an entrepreneurial soul, employs a stand-in to join 3 other senators. Kuzan early morning proxy who collects baskets like it's a festival game and delivers them by noon for a cut. Your porter has caught on and marks his sandal with a dab of vermilion. The man still tries, and you still pretend not to notice because the shoes he makes are excellent and hypocrisy is Rome's house wine. Between greetings, you send messenger boys darting, one to the basilica to book a corner for a consultation, one to the baths to tell your barber you're planning a scandalous midday trim, one to the forums, scribes for a copy of a decree you swear was miscopied last week. Your house hums like a little office park. Scribes shaving reed pens, a secretary smoothing wax, the steward calculating who needs the sportula most, and how much coin the cash box can spare without embarrassing your afternoon. You sign here with a stylus. You promise there with a look that says, yes, but not loudly. A man from the Collegium Fabrum the Builders. Gildan rolls a sketch of a portico you're considering funding near the Forum Holatorium. The drawing looks like a respectable plan and an excellent way to have your name carved into stone without appearing to enjoy it. He sighs about contractors. You sigh about censors. You both pretend marble doesn't have opinions. You schedule a walk-by later with accidental witnesses. At your elbow, the nomenclator leaves you a whisper like a bookmark. Remember Claudia's dowry. Remember Gaius's dye tax. Remember, this is the one whose brother you promised not to forget. You nod with the face that says you already remembered. You're getting good at that face. Rome rewards it. Mainstream fact clears its throat again. Satirists, like Juvenile, loved to mock this whole sign, clients jostling for baskets, patrons being flattered into extinction, the rich handing out leftovers like benevolent gods. You let the satire pass like weather and answer the next petitioner. A veteran with a stiff leg who wants his land grant surveyed with fewer accidental hills. You can fix that with 2 letters and 1 personal walk to a boundary stone, which, if we're honest, you like better than fixing anything that involves tribunes. Historians still argue whether *** clients formed a fixed class or a fluid one, whether they were mostly poor dependents, freedmen, small landholders, or just anyone who preferred a senator's vestibule to a queue at the tax office. Your inner historian murmurs while you listen to a baker who brought poppy seed rolls as though the gods had personally baked them. The truth tonight looks fluid. Faces from every street, every level of confidence, every flavor of hope. Halfway down the line, a young advocate begs for you to sponsor his first appearance in court. Just stand behind me, he says, and look like tomorrow. He's good. You've heard him in a basilica corner, shaping vowels like weapons. You agree to stand and not to rescue, which is how a patron does both kindness and pedagogy at once. He grins and nearly drops his tablet. You take that as a sign you made a nice person's day. The sportula circuit begins. The steward, 2 boys, and a system that only works because the room believes in it. Each recipient receives coin or food and a brief instruction. See my steward after Nona. Walk with me to the forum. Speak to my wife about the midwife. She knows better. The labels are practical as laundry. You have made a habit of making help sound like chores, because chores get done. Joke 2 strolls in, unabashed. The sportula feels suspiciously like a daily login bonus in a game you can't stop playing. The reward is slightly better sandals and a long-term reputation streak. From the back, a well-dressed equestrian sidles up with the look of a man who is technically not a client, but has questions that open with hypothetically. He wants to place money with Publicani, those crisp tax farming companies that can smell a census from a mile away. You nod him toward. Afternoon money belongs to the hours after birds have declared the omens boring. You do what you can in the hallway, and pretend the rest will be easier under different ceilings. The last petition is simple. An old woman asks you to write her grandson's name on your wax, to make it look like Rome noticed him once. You do, with the neatest hand you have, and decide to remember him without the wax. Somewhere into the 2nd hour, the vestibule relaxes. The porter exhales. The dog collapses into art. You tuck 1 last small coin into a boy's palm with the stealth of a magician, and the boy does not look until he is out in the street. Good training. That. Your nomenclator checks his tablet and smudges 3 names with his thumb. Done. Started. Later. You like the honesty of those categories. You suspect that gods use them too. A final client, a man who used to be strong and now is not, tasks nothing and simply stands for a moment in the cool of your atrium, listening to the water in the impluvium as if it has the answer to something you cannot hear. You let him have the moment. That counts as office hours in this building. The street calls. The deductio is ready. A handful of clients who will walk with you to the forum, promptly becoming a portable applause sign and a reminder to competitors that your orbit is inhabited. You arrange the fold of your toga into the public version. Your nomenclator slides to your left. 2 not clients materialize with identical "oh good morning" faces that mean congratulations on still being relevant. Joke 3 nudges your ankle. Somewhere a scribe is drafting a calendar invite that reads, 8:30 stroll. Meaningfully past enemies. You step out. The line disperses with the rustle of problems changing shape. A last basket goes to an old soldier who salutes as if you commanded him yesterday. A last promise hangs in the air like laundry and will be folded by afternoon. The porter pulls the door to, leaving a slice of cooler light inside for the dog. You inhale the street's peppery dust, taste olives and iron, and join your little comet's tail as it swings into the current. The forum is a few careful folds of wool away, and your day already crowded with other people's mornings lengthens ahead, like a road paved with favors. You and your little comet of clients flow into the street, toga arranging itself into what you hope reads as confidence and not upholstery. The city tastes like warm iron, olives, and a tiny bit of yesterday's smoke somebody forgot to put away. Your nomenclator names faces as they pass. That's the banker whose handshake is a contract. That's the poet whose couplets can ruin people without touching them. That's the questor's clerk with the nervous thumb, and you do the polite choreography. Nods that spend no money. Smiles that promise only tomorrow. The deductio, your portable retinue, lengthens by natural selection. 2 young advocates draft behind you like birds in favorable wind. A freedman with excellent penmanship keeps pace, ready to catch a thought before it flies away. The veteran from the vestibule limps on your right, and you arrange your stride to match his without making a show of it. Rome approves of invisible kindness, as long as it doesn't slow the news. You turn down the Argiletum, bookshops blinking open like oysters. Scribes smooth wax and oil their reed pens. A bookseller props a roll of Cicero as bait, and the street answers with men quoting, misquoting, and pretending not to read because reading is a private luxury best performed in public. Mainstream fact walks beside you with a reliable gait. The Argiletum really did funnel traffic between the Subura and the Forum, famous for bookstalls and gossip. The Via Sacra will carry you the last ceremonious stretch like a carpet that happens to be stone. Halfway down, you intercept a magistrate in a high-visibility toga, with a border loud enough to serve as its own herald. Ahead of him, lictors part the air with polite aggression, fasces on shoulder, not so much clearing a path as announcing a category. Imperium is coming through. Adjust accordingly. Your comet folds to the side, not servile, just sensible. You tuck your umbo so it won't attempt civil disobedience. Joke 1 drifts by with sandals squeaking. You swear the lictors must moonlight as crowd control consultants for bakeries on fresh bread days. The velabrum still smells faintly of marsh under the perfume of traders. The Forum, Boreum cattle market sends up a complex hymn of hooves and bargaining. You angle left, past a vendor of hot chickpeas, who has the lungs of an augur and the morals of a grandmother. You look thin. Your clients do a small shared calculus, food now or favor later. Later usually wins. At the Arch of Augustus, 2 boys play at triumph. One pretending to be a general, the other a very enthusiastic captured elephant. You step through, and the Forum Romanum unfolds in its familiar mosaic, the rostra frowning like a wise old balcony. The Basilica Aemilia cool as a thought. The Temple of Castor and Pollux, rising on elegant calves. The Regia, pretending not to be important, while keeping the calendar's keys under its cloak. The stones remember speeches the way parchment remembers ink. Seating on the rostra is already claimed by people who have nothing to do, and intend to do it where history can see them. A herald practices names under his breath. A pair of scribes sharpen their stylus points with the attention of surgeons. Your nose reports wet marble. Bronze warmed to a shy glow, and the faintest whiff of garum someone spilled last year, and never confessed. The soundscape is articulated, sandals slapping in iambs, a mule's bray refusing meter, vendors stitching prices into melody, law talk murmuring like bees that have gone to school. A friend equal rank, better hair slides in beside you with a greeting that means I saw your morning. It looked expensive. You exchange a brief of news. A tribune has been seen near the Temple of Concord looking purposeful. A praetor has lost patience with a backlog. A shipment of grain sits outside Ostia, while someone invents signatures. You trade solutions on credit. I'll speak to the aedile if you soften the questor, and promise each other nothing in a way that means you're both perfectly reliable. Mainstream fact clears its throat from the shade of the Curia, Julia. Senators did not legislate in the modern sense but issued sententiae that became senatus consulta, advisory yet often decisive. Magistrates set the agenda, and tribunes could threaten intercessio, the sacred veto with social teeth. Today's walk is a preface to that theater. The Forum is your green room and also your audience. A cluster of equities, the wealth tier, just under you loiters, near the Basilica Julia, wearing good cloaks, and the expression of men who could buy a province if provinces came in amphory one, with sand still clinging to his hem. Mentions a contract in Sicily for stone you might need if your portico plan survives committee. You schedule an afternoon look at samples and tuck the name in your ears pocket. Joke 2 straightens its laurel and whispers, networking is just shopping for people. Up on the Capitoline, a flute scratches at a scale and then remembers it knows better. Somewhere near the auguriculum, birds are being counted, or at least watched. A boy runs by with feathers in his hair, and the grin of someone who learned the difference between auspicious and auspicious enough. Birds fine, he shouts to nobody in particular, providing Rome with a push notification. Whether anyone believed the update or just enjoyed the delivery, the day loosens a notch. Quirky Tidbit hops onto the rostra and refuses to get down. Certain big deal speakers allegedly hired, clacks professional applauders to cue the crowd. A wave of rhythmic finger snaps, Crotos could turn a decent line into policy by momentum alone. You clock a few men with very alert hands and make a note, either somebody paid for polish or enthusiasm is on sale. Historians still argue whether organized applause belonged more to late Republic theatrics or really took off under the emperors. Either way, the human hand has always loved an assignment. You skirt a patch of paving with a family feud against sandals and fall into the slow river of the Via Sacra with other men shaped like you, early, solemn, internally drafting sentences. A consul passes, laurel on his head. Lictors thinning the air. His face wears the day like a helmet. You offer the right degree nod deference without donation. He returns a look that files you mentally under useful and not noisy, which is where you like to live. Your clients rearrange themselves into a neat ribbon that says relevance without needing ink. A few peel off to their own errands, migrating toward basilicas and bankers. A few stay, ambitious enough to be seen near the Curia door. Your nomenclator updates you. The man with the dye tax question found the e-dial already. The widow's basket arrived at her sister's. The young advocate has stopped shaking. The day is not won, but it is oriented. On the rostra, a hot-headed backbencher rehearses outrage to a small but loyal group of friends who specialize in emphatic nodding. He sees you, calibrates his volume down to Sibyl, and offers a line about the roads to Praeneste being neglected. You file it under later committee and compliment his phrasing. A currency that costs you nothing and buys you a soft landing when he actually needs stone. Your shadow crosses the umbilicus orbis, the navel of the city, because Rome enjoys the metaphor. You put your hand briefly on the Malarium Aureum, the golden milestone, because you enjoy it too. All roads measured from here. All letters finding their way back by stubborn geometry. Joke 3 tilts the moment. You promise to center yourself and then immediately draft a list that leads everywhere else. You angle past the Temple of Vesta, where the hearth breathes a steady institutional warmth, and salute the Vestals with a glance measured to be respectful, without becoming headline material. A scribe from the Aerarium State Treasury hustles by, with the look of a man who misplaced the key to a chest the size of a moral. You decide not to know him yet. Historians still argue whether senators regularly walked in large retinues each morning or if the grand parades belonged to election days and triumphal seasons. Your inner guide mutters while you let a cart pass that somehow has daytime permission. The truth today is somewhere in the middle. Enough bodies to look like gravity, not enough to block a tribune who decides to test personal space. The Curia Julia throws a rectangle of cool shadow across your feet, as if inviting them to sit down before the rest of you earns it. Two lictors at the door collect names and faces with the polite menace of men who know exactly where your chair is and whether you still deserve it. A bailiff examines the fold of your toga with professional interest. The wool sighs as if relieved to have reached the building it was tailored to impress. Before you step inside, you do the last-minute corridor diplomacy. The brief with the grain man, my baker is nervous. Tell your baker I like him nervous. The palm touch with the contractor sample slabs after Nona. The check-in with the priest about the calendar, no ominous goats today. You're clear. Each exchange adds felt to the day's sharp edges. The sun lifts a fraction. The forum's colors sharpen the basilica's pale stone, the bronze door's green memory, the laurel leaves' insistence on being both shade and omen. Your comet thins respectfully at the Curia threshold. Ready to wait outside and be seen waiting? You tilt your head to read the faces near the door. An ally who can count. A rival who cannot smile without making it look like policy. A neutral who will become whoever wins the second debate, not the first. You put one palm on the Curia's cool wall, just long enough to inherit its temperature, and breathe in through the day's story, and out through the day's noise. The hinges ahead are already murmuring in bronze. When the doors open, the first thing through will be air in a new shape, silence that means business. You let your hands slip into the togas, fold a practiced dock for wandering fingers and step forward. Toward seats, agenda, and the contest between today's plan and today's reality, waiting patiently inside. Inside the Curia, the air resets cooler, slower, like a public throat clearing. The bronze hinges finish their sentence behind you, and the room becomes a logic problem made of benches. Light slants from high windows and lays pale ladders across subcellia polished by generations of wool. You slide along a board that has learned more secrets than any library, and try to look like a person who always meant to sit exactly here. At the far end, the presiding magistrate at a console with a laurel that's doing quiet PR takes, the cella curulus, that folding ivory chair which says authority without saying comfortable. Two lictors stand just inside the door like very polite doorposts. The rest wait outside with fasces on shoulders. Those bundled rods that remind everyone that sticks, gathered, are opinions with consequences. Inside the pomerium, the axes are sheaths mainstream fact, because tradition prefers the city governed by persuasion and sticks, not blades. On the left wall, the augur you waved to on the steps inclines his head and sets down his curved lituous staff. Birds acceptable, he says in a voice that would make thunder behave. And the room exhales the notch of breath you didn't notice you were holding. He has done the ritual math already on the auguriculum, above dividing the sky into legal quarters. Checking for unfriendly lightning. Watching whether sacred chickens performed their tripudium, that contented drop of food from beak that counts as a yes. Quirky tidbit struts in on tiny claws. The Pularitha chicken keepers are famously unflappable civil servants. One tradition says, a general who got a bad omen once tossed the birds overboard. If they will not eat, let them drink, which is an attitude you will not be copying in a room with minutes. Auspicia impetrativa, performed, the augur adds the asked for omens and a scriba scratches the phrase into wax, so the gods have paperwork. You feel the room's posture change from waiting to working, the way a river changes tone when it finds its channel. Historians still argue whether bad omens could legally halt a Senate meeting, or only popular assemblies' repeals of the Lex Alia et Fufia, late Republic cleverness, and the unkillable art of obnunciatio, make a footnote bonfire, but everyone here behaves as if signs matter because behaving is 9/10 of Rome. The consul reads the edictum of the dietums to refer to the house voice steady as a water clock. First, letters from governors. There are always letters from governors. Second, a report from the aediles about grain ships outside Ostia learning patience. Third, a matter of roads praenesti again. The backbencher will be insufferably pleased. Fourth, a delicate note about a temple roof that has opinions about gravity. Fifth, a rumor wrapped as a question about a tribune who intends to test how long a senate can hold its breath. Your eyes follow the invisible seating map everyone knows and nobody admits exists. Front benches to the consular's men, who have worn the year on their name, and would like you to mention it often. Behind them, praetori and aedilic at those who have worn lesser magistracies, and the tired satisfaction that comes with them. Toward the back, the paideria, the younger ones who walked to vote without speaking. At least in older practice. Historians still argue whether the princeps venatus, the symbolic first man of the Senate, still spoke first late in the Republic, or whether custom drifted so consuls summoned voices in the order that suited them: red, politics in plain sandals. Either way, you know exactly how many faces stand between your mouth and your turn. A herald reads a governor's dispatch. In the provinces, boundary stones grow arguments overnight. 2 towns have moved a milestone the length of a bribe. You picture the stones sighing and going along because rocks in files have always lost. The consul says, "Refero, I bring this and invite sententio opinions." An old consular stands, smoothing wool the way men pat dogs they don't own. He speaks first, not because of law, but because nobody wants to be the man who launches before that jaw has finished remembering authority. A scriba ab actus sits near the front, stylus poised. Since Augustus, minutes the actus senatus exist in a more disciplined way. Earlier, speakers quoted themselves from memory with creative embroidery. Under the first princeps, the minutes are kept, but publication is a different dance. You watch the scribes read, flicker, and realize the fastest route to immortality is a secretary, with clear handwriting and low standards for adjectives. Joke 1 slides along the bench. You wish the augur would check the auspices for your to-do list if the chickens approve. The emails may eat today. A tribune of the plebs saunters inside late, with the entitlement of a sacred man who can't technically be stopped from entering any room where citizens might need a guardian. His viator assistant takes a discreet place by the door. The tribune's presence itself is an omen of the veto, that intercessio which can turn today's agenda into origami. The lictors eye him with the cordial frost of men who enforce imperium and dislike mystical exceptions to rules. The tribune ignores the weather, as tribunes do. The consul calls on you 3 places earlier than expected, that little jolt of visibility that feels like a warm hand on your back, and a worried glance at your notes. You stand, right hand still under the toga's fold so the left can count without looking like it's counting. You approve the governor's proposal to send arbiters for the boundary. Caution that the publicani, the tax farmers, should not be allowed to set the marker with their abbacy, and add a sentence designed to be quoted by a scribe who appreciates short words. Stones should move less than men. You sit before your wit can improve the line into trouble. Mainstream fact taps the armrest. Formal votes could divide the House by disgessio senators, physically separating 2 different sides, or by pedibus in sententiam litorally walking to the opinion they favored. Earlier, the Padari got their name from this foot voting. Today, the consul postpones voting until letters 2 and 3 are heard. The delay is part courtesy, part chess. Between items, there is the doorway diplomacy that keeps policy from sweating on stage. A colleague slides over on the bench like a shadow and whispers that the grain report is worse than the tone suggested. The prefectus unknown is counting days the way a baker counts size. You make a note to appear impressed by optimism, and prepare a sentence that will ask for numbers without sounding like accusation. Quirky tidbit leans in under the clatter of a dropped stylus. Some days a boy with a clepsydra water clock times speeches in the courts. In the Senate, the hourglass appears less often, but everyone pretends it's here anyway. You have trained your sentences to be amphorisized, liftable, stackable, unlikely to leak. The trick is to stop before the metaphor starts running around the room unattended. The seating around you speaks in microlanguages. A rustle of rings means impatience. A synchronized throat clear from a bench of experters means, "Don't you dare skip our turn." A deliberate silence from the consulars means, "We are allowing this, and you should be grateful." Your own bench conducts mood with the grace of a mediocre chorus learning a new hymn. Joke 2 raises an eyebrow. If you had a choirmaster, the Curia would be a better orchestra and a worse republic. The consuls move to item 2. The ediles report on grain. Ships delayed by wind, one by breakdown, one by a captain who discovered that the sea writes its own memos. The house fills with the soft fury of men who are very used to being fed on time. You stand again. This time to propose that the Horia banneries release a measured cushion and that the naviculary ship owners be offered a bonus for arriving before the next calends. A man who measures everything in political calories accuses you of bribing the sea. You reply that you are merely bribing gravity less poetic, more effective. Historians still argue whether the Senate's grain management in the late Republic was competent stewardship or an endless patchwork of emergency fixes, says your inner pedant while your outer face practices care. The truth feels like the forum pavement, firm where it has been walked the most, treacherous where everyone assumes it is fine. A sacristan from the Temple of Jupiter slips in with a note about a cracked tylitum for whose failure during a storm would look like theology. The House votes to pay the craftsman without performing a drama about it. The backbencher with the pre-amnesty roads gives his speech to general murmurs of worthy and specific murmurs of later. The Tribune finally stands, smiles without majority, and announces that on item 5 somebody's cousin's trial date, he will consider intercession if the gods smile upon delay. The room adjusts its day like a cloak in a draft. The consul signals the disgessio on the first 2 items. The benches unpeeled like bread. You walk to the side of reason, and enough purple walks with you to make it policy. The scribes tally in wax that will harden into senatus, consultum by evening advice, dressed for executive action. A messenger is sent to the aerarium, another to the riverside, another to the governor who moved a stone with a letter, and now must move it back with a blush. Joke 3 tugs your sleeve. You imagine the sacred chickens as your compliance team. If they peck, proceed. If they sulk, reschedule. If they swim, take a day off. The room softens as the heavy items find their shelves. Conversations lengthen. The augur slips out to argue with a cloud. A lictor adjusts a strap, the way men adjust time. You tilt your head at the seating map one more time, and notice a blank place where a friend should be illness, exile, or prudence. Rome teaches you to read absences like letters. The consul closes with a formula so worn, it shines. The lictors shift from stone to air. The Curia exhales men into the forum again. As you rise, the bench gives a friendly creak, the old woods way of saying it has outlasted better speeches and worse storms. You smooth your togas, fold the yumbo, still a diva. Touch the cool wall in thanks for hosting your ambition safely, and aim yourself at the doorway. Outside, tribunes, law courts, and a city that believes agendas are only suggestions written by early risers. Inside you, the memory of birds doing their job, a chicken-based policy win, and the sense that today, at least for an hour, the gods and the groceries agreed. You don't get 3 steps into the sun before a scriba ab actus catches your sleeve like a polite hook. If you please, he murmurs, and you are steered not into the forum, but into the tablinum-scented corner room, where words become law-colored. The Curia's echo is still on your cloak. Your sentences haven't quite landed. Good. This is the room where they learn to walk. On a low table sits a neat stack of wax tablets, their black sheen flecked with stylus crumbs. The head scribe recites the bones of what you just lived, relatio by the consul, sententiae taken in order, disgessio on items 1 and 2. The House censute the Senate, judged thus and so. You hear your own line, stones should move less than men, come back to you in a voice so neutral it could serve in temples. He writes with the calm of a river. You feel petty for liking how the consonants look. Mainstream fact lays a clean tile. A senatus consultum is technically advice, not statute, but in the late Republic it bites like law when carried by magistrates. It's introduced by a magistrate refer, debated by sententiae, voted, written, and preserved in the Julius Caesar briefly published the Actus Natus. Augustus kept records but throttled public release. Copying and quoting became an art with consequences. You watch the scribe shape the formula, quad bonum, faustum, felix, fortunatumps. Sit may it be good, favorable, lucky, and fortunate, and you think, even the preface wears armor. The head scribe wants phrasing for a hinge clause. How much authority to offer the arbitrary? Who will reset those feuding boundary stones? You draft aloud, ut arbitrum sententia, rata sitlet, the arbiter's decision stand. A consular, drifting in, swaps rata for firma because his ear likes muscle more than glue. The line breathes better. The wax accepts the improvement without pride. Outside, the forum rehearses its day. In here, you rehearse voice, Sententii in the Curia have their own grammar. You've felt it settling in your ribs. Stand, tuck the right hand in the toga, begin with sensio, or sentio. Keep the first verb within one breath. Save the ornament for the second sentence, and stop before wit becomes weather. Quirky tidbit tidies the air, to keep throats honest. Some speakers chewed mastic resin, or pastilles of myrrh and honey. Not quite cough drops, not quite sacrament. You keep two in a fold like emergency birds. A junior scribe reads the title line, date by consuls, place of meeting. The princeps senatus isn't here to quibble about precedents, so the formula stays practical. Historians still argue whether the order of speaking remains strictly by seniority in late Republican practice, or whether presiding consuls increasingly curated the sequence to engineer outcomes. Your inner seminar says while your outer mouth supplies a comma. The truth today looked curated. The consul called you early, because your line would float a vote. The room pretended custom wrote it. A tabularious runner waits to sprint the polished consultum to the aerarium for deposit and duplication. Another will carry certified copies to the prefectus unknown and the governor who moved a stone by letter, and will now move it back by men. A junior clerk sands a papyrus duplicate with a pinch of dusta. Little dessert on the page to dry ink, so the words won't kiss each other shut. Joke one wanders by. Well-mannered, your archive is cloud storage, except the cloud is a hill with locks and a man named Lucius, who hates smudges. You are not done with voices. The consul's attendant asks you to return to the chamber for the stray sententii on item 3 grain because someone important has arrived late and wishes to have been here all along. You re-enter the Curia to find a rearranged weather, a former consul warming his voice. 3 men practicing dissimulatio, the art of looking undecided, while very decided. The tribune leaning against a column like a veto, disguised as casual. The presiding consul nods to the consular. The man stands and launches into a sententia shaped like a hill, rising with gravitas, leveling with data, descending with benevolence. He favors periodic sentences, those elegant loops that hold breath hostage until the verb chooses to arrive. You favor brick on brick, because Rome builds better than it floats. When it's your turn, you stitch a short clause to his long rope and offer the Horia release again, sized 2 days in Modi. The backbenchers hum approval, a sound like bees voting. Dissidite, the consul orders, and the house divides, literally your peers drifting to stand behind benches signifying options. Pedibus in sententio, you walk into your opinion. It's choreography in wool. The messengers count heads with lips, fingers, and frowns. The scribe pricks wax with little points that will become number words later. Disgessio is a very Roman invention. Ask bodies to mean what mouths complicate. Mainstream fact slips a bronze on the table. We actually have a full senatorial decree in metal. The Senatus Consultum de Bacchanalibus, 186 BCE, a big, tough bronze ordered posted in Italian towns, limiting Bacchic rights, naming magistrates, fines, and the praetor urbanus. It begins with that formula quad bonum, and reads like counting beads. No poetry, only power in a room-shaped voice. You love it the way bakers love scales. Between votes, a younger man asks the floor to opine on a trial, date his cousin. Of course, and the tribune smiles, the kind of smile that makes calendars nervous. He does not veto. He threatens to, if today's outcome fails, to smell like justice. You offer a middle path, 2 weeks, and a letter to the praetor about courtroom order, and the tribune pockets the compromise like a coin he intends to spend later. Quirky tidbit peeks over your shoulder. One senator, name mercifully forgotten, was said to scratch tiny doodles in his wax when speeches dragged. Ships for sea bills, little sheaves for grain, and once infamously, a chicken to mark the augur's report. When the scribe copied the minutes, the doodle punctured the wax and came through. For a month the office swore the gods had drawn a bird next to the vote. The consultum on grain now has teeth. Bonus for early naviculary, measured release, censure if the Horia master lies by more than a day. The consul dictates, the scribes carve, a herald practices the reading he'll do on the rostra, for the benefit of ears that like their law aloud. You sign the margin with a little stroke of the stylus, not a signature. More a witness marquant. The wax receives it like a familiar finger. Historians still argue whether the emergency formula, the senatus consultum ultimum, videant consuls ni quid res publica detrimenti capiat, was a constitutional safety valve or a polite coup written in cursive. Your inner lecturer says as you watch a clerk cap his ink with the reverence of a man closing a tiny tomb. You hope not to hear that formula today. Rome runs better when its verbs stay ordinary. The tribunal business breaks for air. Men dissolve toward the light. You linger because someone always needs the quiet after thunder. A capsorius, the document slave with a cylindrical capso, packs the finished tablets like a beekeeper housing queens. He will walk them to the tabularium's deep breath vaults, where records sleep with views of arches and the forgiving backs of hills. Joke 2 adjusts your toga. The capsorius is also what schoolboys call the slave who carries their book bags. Rome reuses job titles the way it reuses marble. On the steps, a friend asks how you keep your sentenci short. I write the verb first, you say, and it's only half a joke. He confesses to ending every speech with a favorite line. You grin because Cato the Elder did that on purpose. Ceterum, sinceu Cartagini. Isi delendo, and history called it persistence, like a compliment. A messenger sprints off, tablet wrapped in linen, seal cooling like a moon. The consultum exists now in at least 5 places. The wax here, the copy at the aerarium, the herald's lungs, 2 slaves' memories. You like redundancy. The gods like witnesses. The city receives your work the way a body receives water, without ceremony and with consequences later. You descend the Curia steps into noon that smells faintly of olive wood and ink. Your ears still hold the room's tone benches creaking assent, a tribune's velvet threat, your own sentence aligning its spine. Voices made a shape. Scribes made that shape survive. Joke 3 strolls beside you. Hands folded in its toga, like a model citizen. Somewhere a chicken thinks it passed a bill. You leave the shadow of the Curia with the slow pride of a person whose words now have addresses. Granary doors, governor's hands, a bronze to be read out loud where the pigeons practice literacy. The noon glare flattens marble into bright grammar, and the shade along the basilica walls becomes punctuation where sentences meet to renegotiate themselves. You've barely adjusted your toga to outdoor when the tribune glides over with the serenity of a man born inside a loophole. His viator hovers, a respectful 2 paces behind, carrying nothing and everything. The hint of intercessio, that sacred eye, forbid which, can turn a freighted day into interpretive dance. He doesn't say veto. He says consolamus. Let us consolamus, let us console, because Rome is allergic to verbs that arrive without furniture. You steer with him into a doorway that has heard more policy than most scrolls. The wall is cool. His voice is cooler. He floats concerns about the grain clause. The bonus looks like favoritism. The release looks like panic. Sighs on behalf of ship owners whose mothers have opinions. And mentions a cousin who believes the calendar can be persuaded to move a court date without looking guilty. You let him stack his tiles. Then you lay one, small, square. Let the Horia release be limited to N days. Let the bonus be retroactive only to ships already in sight of Ostia. And let the cousin love justice in 2 weeks. The doorway approves by not collapsing. Mainstream fact squeezes in alongside your shoulder. A tribune of the plebs. Was sacrosancta sacrosanct touching him unlawfully, meant sacrilege. He could convene the concilium plebis, propose plebiscita, and above all, wield intercessio, the power to stop a magistrate's action or halt a Senate meeting. One tribune, just one, could paralyze a day. A colleague could intercede against him, intercessio intercession, which is Rome's idea of balance. Let equal sacredness make a fair mess. Historians still argue whether a tribune's veto could bind provincial commands or military matters beyond the pomerium, or if its pulse faded at the city line. Late Republic practice looks like a palette rather than a rulebook. You both step out of the doorway and into a movable committee formed by benches, elbows, and the shared art of not hearing what can't be said yet. A consular saunters over, antique dignity twinkling, and contributes a proverb that means don't pay the sea, pay the men who think they own it. Your backbencher Praenesti Rhodes tries to weld his agenda onto the moment. Everyone practices dissimulatio, that noble Roman pastime where faces rest at home while minds sprint marathons. The workaround begins where every Roman workaround begins. You count votes, favors, grudges, cousins, clubs of men who dine together and pretend they don't. The one augur whose eyebrows can move a calendar. The tribune doesn't need to win. He needs to prove he could refuse to lose. You don't need to roll. You need to lower the hill until it looks like a road. Joke 1 wipes a bit of marble dust off your fold. Imagine a productivity app called Intercessio that pauses your colleagues until they negotiate snacks. A courier slides past with a sealed tablet for the tabularium. The tribune watches it like a cat watches a parade of canaries and says, with the good manners of threat, "It would be a pity if that were read before I have slept on it." The sentence wears sandals made of velvet. You reply with a sentence made of felt. The herald on the rostra reads after nona. Your sleep is sacred until nona. The viator relaxes one vertebra. Quirky tidbit peeks around the column. Some tribunes kept a benchia literal subcella parked just outside the Curia door so they could plant themselves like a human stop sign. Others reportedly carried a small veil they could throw over their head the way priests do. An instant signal that religion just entered the chat. Whether anyone really needed props is unclear. The word veto works fine without accessories. You walk a loop along the Basilica Julia colonnade, collecting whispers the way a hem collects dust. A praetor offers to help draft a cleaner bonus clause. If the tribune will graciously discover a more urgent cause to defend this afternoon, an edile suggests announcing a small distribution of cheap grain in the forum. Not because the city is starving, but because feelings like to see their reflections. A banker discreetly proposes a bridge loan to Naviculari, with an interest rate low enough to look public-spirited, high enough to please bronze ledgers. Historians still argue whether tribunation obstruction in the 50s and 40s BCE was a constitutional safety valve, or a political weapon that helped break the republic's steering. Your inner seminar mutters while your outer mouth thanks the praetor and files the banker under future usefulness. You think of Sulla, who clipped the tribunate's wings, of Pompey and Caesar, who refeathered it to suit weather, of Clodius, who turned the office into a marching band. Balance in Rome is something you do with feet, not principles. The tribune leans on a column and performs public hesitation, that sacred theater where a man advertises conscience. You admire the craft. Conscience makes good politics when it takes appointments. You offer him a seat at the porch of Castor and Pollux. A tiny audience with ship owners at Nona, and naming rights on the edict for grain distribution, Tribunetia Curabi Tribunetian Care. He pretends to count the capitals on the temple's columns. You pretend not to notice the viator counting nods behind him. Mainstream fact lays another tile. A tribune could also convene a public meeting without a voton or near the rostra, letting speakers warm the crowd and brand the issue. The move is older than microphones and just as effective. Talk loudly where stone makes your vowels big. Then let rumor do bookkeeping. Your tribune glances at the rostra like a man mentally unrolling a banner. You propose a conteo tomorrow, after the edict posts. He can take credit for the soft cushion under the city's anxiety. The banner looks better in his head. He nods the small nod that means your intercessio risk is downgraded to opinion and vanishes into a fresh cluster of elbows. The viator lingers just long enough to practice saying veto silently, and then goes to lunch like a man who just canceled disaster politely. You let your shoulders forget to be armor for 2 breaths. The doorway committee expands to include the grain man, 2 ship owners with weather on their faces, and a scribe who thinks with his stylus. You rough out a rescript, a short note from the presiding consul clarifying the intent. Bonus only upon entry to the harbor. Release limited to 3 days. Accounting sent to the treasurers. The ship owners nod in the international dialect, for we can live with this. The scribe writes cleanly. The scribe always writes cleanly. Civilization is a stylus point that refuses to wobble. Joke 2 flips a coin in your pocketless toga. Never negotiate hungry. Your sportula breakfast is gone. Your barber is expecting you like a secondary source. And the baths have exactly the temperature of sanity. Soon, a young quester jogs up with eyes like badly trained puppies and asks whether to proceed with the auction of a seized warehouse while the grain question breathes. You reholster his enthusiasm with 2 words, postpone decently, and a promise to sign his edict after the baths, so he can practice the ancient art of doing nothing with confidence. He beams, which is what good government looks like from the inside. Relieved 20-somethings. Historians still argue whether the infamous emergency decree, the Senatus Consultum Ultimum, could legally override a tribune's veto or merely license the magistrates to ignore it at their own peril. Your internal lecturer adds as you pass the Temple of Concord, where patience is carved in stone and then, often, not practiced. You prefer days when you don't have to ask the Constitution to shout. One last bench meeting. Your ally from the Curia proposes language to sprinkle piety on the policy quad. Salus populi postulate, because nothing oils compromise like the people's safety and the ablative. You approve, mostly because it sounds like thunder in a clean tunic. The herald appears on the rostra with a practiced cough and a roll of words. By the time he clears his throat twice, the crowd assembles itself into attentiveness. He reads the smoothed consultum. The contio is scheduled for tomorrow in big letters you can hear. The tribune's name lands in the right place. The city exhales in the way crowds do audibly and with relief, like furniture settling. Quirky tidbit waves from the corner of a memory. Some speakers in the forum used trained helpers in the crowd to begin applause or groans at agreed kuza. Kind of early soundboard made of humans. You spot 3 likely suspects practicing synchronized eyebrow lifts. Useful, if you can afford eyebrows. The tribune passes you once more, eyes soft as laurel shade, now that his no has been successfully cashed in as credit. He offers a single word, gratia, and you answer with pupulo, to the people, because humility is the mint that coins you safe passage in this place. Joke 3 pats your arm. You briefly consider carrying a portable doorway for on-demand compromise. But then remember, you already do. It's called your face. The heat leans on the stone the way cats do. Your toga performs its slow sail toward the baths. You've threaded the veto through a workaround sown with committees and polite fictions. The day didn't break. The grain will move. The rostra will sing tomorrow, behind you. Benches and doorways forget your name instantly. Which is fine, there are more doorways, more benches, more names to file under solved for now. Your step loosens toward the thermi, where telegrams are warm water and politics floats for a minute, before being toweled back into shape. You're halfway to the baths when a lictor materializes like a polite speed bump. Domini, the praetor expects you. He says, which is the Roman for, remember the hearing you agreed to when life looked shorter. You pivot from steam to statute and let the basilicas swallow you. The Basilica Julia humming with civil suits in tidy rows. The Basilica Aemilia cool as a ledger. Under these roofs, voices don't shout. They Caristone edits them into low-sized sentences. First stop is the in-your phase before the Praetor Urbanus. 2 citizens, 1 contract. One claims stipulatio was broken. The other claims that gods misunderstood the small print. The Praetor isn't here to decide the truth. He decides the frame. He flips through his album of formulae, those ready-made legal recipes, and picks one like a chef with a conscience. See Parrot, condemnato. See Nan Parrot, absolve if it appears, condemned if not, acquit. He names a single iudex privatus, a private judge from the list, and hands over the little wooden tabella with the formula scratched on it. The rest will happen apud iudicem before the judge, not the praetor. Mainstream fact lays it down. Late Republican civil procedure mostly ran on the formulary system. Tu stagin, you're with the magistrate. Apud iudicem, with a named judge quicker than the antique legis actions and civil enough to fit inside a workday. You promised one side a few words, not a Ciceronian siege, just a porchlight of a speech to keep the judge oriented. You step into the rectangle of space that is somehow always there, Tuck your right hand into your toga, and build short sentences like scaffolding. The stipulation was clear. The delivery was late. The penalty was not a meteorite but a fair nomus count. The defendant's best argument is a calendar, and we have a better calendar. You drop one friendly line for the judge. Obligations are like milestones. Move them too often and roads stop being roads and stop before your wit buys consequences. Joke one wanders by in sandals. You imagine a progress bar carved in wax above the judge's head. Argument, downloading. Please do not blow on the tablets. From civil tidy to criminal heat, the quaestiota repetandus, the standing court for extortion by officials, has convened in a cordoned corner like a storm choosing a field. The praetor peregrinus presides. On benches sit Iodice's jurors pulled from the album Iudicum. Who exactly fills those seats depends on the year's politics. Historians still argue whether the tribuni aerae in the Lex Aurelia of 70 BCE were lower equestrians or a separate tax-paying order, but the blend here is clear enough. Senators, equities, and those mysterious third men, all sworn to weigh the purse of a provincial governor without listening to his dinner invitations. The charge is familiar. A proconsul returned from a province with more silver than excuses. Witnesses mumble about corn levies, forced gifts, and an audit that turned into a magic trick. The accusator waves account books like sea flags. The Rios defendant sits very straight and very golden. You are not lead counsel, thank the lares, but the defense asked you to stand behind him, which is Roman for, please be tall and calm so my clients don't faint. You do tall, you do calm, and you pass a note suggesting he blame his quaestor exactly 8%, which is the currently fashionable fraction for shared incompetence. Voting here is secret, another mainstream tile, thanks to ballot laws creeping in over the 2nd century BCE. Jurors drop tabella marked A for absolvo I acquit, C for condemno, and sometimes NL for non lique. It's not clear, a polite stall that triggers ampliatio, delay for further evidence. You practice the slow art of delay before you need it. Your ally on the panel mutters that a key witness is still on the road from Sardinia, and the account books from the aerarium are a day late because the clerk tripped over prudence. You raise your hand just enough to be furniture and request an ampliatio. Let the res be amplianda, let it be enlarged. The praetor nods. The prosecutor smiles with only half his mouth. Time, that most Roman of tactics, enters a legal appearance. Quirky tidbit rides in on a law clerk's shoulders. Water clocks clipsy drayed time speeches in the courts. The stream pinched for rebuttal like a miser pinches coin. Some orators sweet-talk the equerry clock tenders to tilt the flow. Others stuff a pebble under the spout for an extra minute of compassion. Whether this happened often or merely enough to make poets jealous, you keep your eye on the bucket and your argument on its feet. Before the jurors file their tabella, procedure requires witnesses. A city architect describes the governor's house in the province as fitted for breezes, which is Roman for expensive, and everyone pretends they didn't hear breezes wink. A tax farmer smelling faintly of ink and anxiety insists he followed the Lex Hieronica to the letter. Your side replies that he used the wrong alphabet. The praetor, to his credit, keeps the court from borrowing the forum's volume and nudges the scribe when the minutes begin to daydream. You get yanked into another track entirely centum viral court. Business because a hereditas case a will like a labyrinth needs. You to sit as one of many Iodices in a panel big enough to count as a neighborhood. The Basilica Julia houses them like beehives, each cluster with its own verga rod for a judge to touch when spicuna, kind of wooden permission slip for words. Mainstream fact tax on the centum viri, literally 100 men. In practice more judge property and inheritance disputes. Advocates sometimes introduce the sacramentuma token stacas. If the whole quarrel were a game with bail money. You listen to cousins argue whether Aunt Tullia meant to my dearest or to my nearest when she left the vineyard. You write nearest equals me in the margin of your patience. Delay here wears friendlier clothes. Avatum numa. Promise to appear later under penalty shifts the whole affair to a day when tempers will have found jobs. You vote yes to vatimonium because even Rome believes naps should happen to lawsuits. Joke 2 leans over the bench. You picture scheduling an ampliatio as a recurring calendar invade every other Tuesday. Breathe, postpone, hydrate. Back in repetande, the ballots rustle wood sliding against wood, tomorrow deciding to be later. A cluster of ENL not clear tips the day, toward ampliatio. The prosecutor sighs in dactylic hexameter. The defense tries not to smile with teeth. The praetor sets a new disa day, careful to pick one the calendar allows. Dies fasty for law, not nefasti for gods. You privately thank whoever invented the fasty for making bureaucracy look holy. Historians still argue whether your average senator spent more hours pleading or judging whether the courtroom was a gentleman's gym or a place you visited like the baths. Your inner seminar murmurs, while your outer face rearranges into empathy. Cicero made the courtroom into a theater. Most colleagues made it into a corridor they passed through on the way to dinner. Today, you're somewhere in the middle. Your words counted, your votes counted more, your delays counted most. You slip to the Basilica Aemilia for a private arbitration about a contract on roofing tiles. The parties have agreed that your nod is more affordable than a full priesthood of paperwork. You seat them under a fresco of elephants and tell them to pretend you are stone. They do. And in 20 minutes, a compromise appears that smells like fired clay and minor regret. You scribble names on a wax tablet so the capsarius doca slave with a cylindrical capsican file it in your house archive, which is rapidly becoming the library of solvable things. You are finally, almost free, when a titelmonger, the man who writes labels and edicts for a living, waves a fresh edictum from the praetor. Tomorrow's contio on grain is posted at the rostra, with the tribune's name engraved in generous letters. The law courts vibrate approvingly. Nothing soothes litigation like bread that promises to arrive. You watch two litigants pause mid-bicker to read the notice and then agree to postpone. The edict just won a lawsuit no one will thank it for. Quirky tidbit shuffles in with the bailiffs. A few courts keep a little basket under the magistrate's chair. Querulous advocates drop a coin in it when they can't stop arguing after ampliatio is granted, a ritual fine for talking to tomorrow. Whether this is myth or policy disguised as humor, you fantasize about issuing baskets to your entire acquaintance. The Preco Herald calls the day's end in a voice that knows the difference between a case closing and a door closing. Jurors unbend, scribe cap ink, and advocates practice humility on the way out, like athletes cooling down. You step back into the basilica's threshold light and let your ears convert from law to air. Joke 3 pats your shoulder. You've delayed 2 trials, settled a roof, and contributed a sentence to a contract. Technically, you have done nothing 3 different ways, which in Rome is sometimes the most useful thing a senator can do. The baths reappear on your horizon like a promise signed in steam. Your stomach remembers prandium once happening, your barber has saved a chair, and your freedman is somewhere counting messages like birds. You turn your steps toward warm water and softer voices. Still carrying the day's favorite verb in your pocket ampliaire. Enlarge is full for time, mercy, and the distance between anger and decision. The basilica's exhale, the forum absorbs, and you walk, a moving comma between accusation and lunch. Your stomach files a polite petition, and you grant prandium the quick, unceremonious midday bite that keeps lawsuits from sounding like growls. A stall near the basilica. Amelia hands you bread with cheese and a dribble of honey. A few olives that taste like they attended the morning session. And a cup of watered wine that remembers a grape more fondly than accurately. Mainstream fact hums along. Romans usually kept prandium light bread, fruit, leftover saving theater for the cena. You eat walking, which in this city counts as both practicality and diplomacy. You can nod with a mouthful of olive if you chew like a senator. Your feet deliver you to the thermi, the way habit always beats maps. This is not one of the megapalace's emperor's favor. It's a well-behaved balneum tucked near the forum, clean tiles, good steam, gossip set to a responsible volume, in the entrance. The capsarius, not your document slave, but his bathhouse cousin who guards basket size your folded toga like a ransom note, and tags it with a twist of cord. Theft is a Bath's favorite sport. You tip now and tip again later, because trust here is measured in sesterces and side-eye. You pass through the apodidium undressing room to the palestra, the courtyard where men pretend to exercise and actually negotiate. Two equestrians are playing trigon, the three-person ball game that looks gentle and is a masterclass in not dropping favors. A ball boy snatches misses and returns them with the speed of an amendment. You rotate your shoulders, make a respectable effort at catching twice, and then let a junior colleague win so he can practice magnanimity in public. Joke 1, towels off. You claim your shoulder is saving its veto power for tomorrow. Inside, the air warms to tepidarium temperature prolate heat. Tiled benches, the hypocaust breathing underfoot like a dragon that's found meaning in life. Mainstream fact points to the floor. The Romans, underfloor heating hot air from a furnace running through brick pillars turned rooms into reliable weather. Walls carried flues so heat climbed like ambition. A fornicator furnace man pads past suit-streaked sacred keeper of everyone's mood. He has the serenity of a man whose fire rights policy. You oil up in the unctuarium with help from an unctor, that indispensable craftsman of shine. No soap, this is the olive oil method. A strigil curved scraper draws off sweat and dust into something neither purely gross nor entirely unholy. Quirky tidbit glints in the bowl. Bath attendants sometimes sold this scrape-off glowios as a medicinal salve. Athletes swore it cured anything that involved opinions and elbows. You do not buy a jar. Your elbows are already politically adequate. From tepidarium to caldarium, door opens. Heat steps on your lungs like an affectionate elephant. The labra marble basin glows with warm water. You rinse, you breathe. You remember the veto you threaded this morning and let the steam teach it manners. A barber wanders in with a portable kit tonsor on wheels in case you want a quick trim while your pores negotiate. You promise him your chin after the plunge because you fear razors in sauna philosophy. A freedman appears at a respectful distance, bearing a wax tablet held in a cloth to keep your oil from turning messages into soup. He reports in sentences shaped for steam. A letter from Ostia says to grain chips are under oars. The praetor's clerk has fixed the edict language to the tribune's pleasure. The stone samples for your portico arrived, one honest. One trying to be your steward, has seated Claudia's father at dinner, not next to his rival, because your house likes to live. He lists 3 names waiting outside the baths with questions about roads, rent, and a dowry that wants to be a bridge. You approve the stone that looks like clouded milk, and tell him to make the other stones seek a different senator. You float, briefly, on the marble bench, and practice stillness. The laconicom dry hot room waits, if you want the feeling of being roasted into civility. But today you choose mercy, and step into the frigidarium. The cold pool bites your pride and your calves in equal measure. And your brain reorganizes its agenda with the clarity of a startled fish. On the far side, a consul you trust is pretending not to plan governorships in a whisper. You pretend not to overhear and mentally invent an expedition called "We will not ruin this by talking while wet." Historians still argue whether senators preferred the great public thermi or their own private baths at midday. Customs shift between late Republic and Empire. Some days you show up for the networking, some days you hide for the sanity. Your inner professor notes while your outer self smiles at an ally without stepping on the water's opinion of movement. Out of the plunge and into the towel, into the tonstrina corner where the barber leans you back on a board that has known more secrets than many couches. He sharpens his novacula on pumice, flicks the blade with a flourish too artistic for comfort, and harvests your stubble while reciting the forum's gossip with admirable evenness of tone. A tribune's ex-girlfriend has opinions about conscience. A banker's son has invented a way to lose money without appearing to touch it. A poet got booed by 3 professionals, whose rhythm, to be fair, was excellent. You say interesting in 3 distinct registers, which is the Roman for this is not actionable yet. Past the barber, a pumice stone addresses your heels, senatorial feet collect arguments. A slave with Volsolate Weezer's offers to tidy your brows into something the gods can recognize on a coin. You decline on behalf of Zeus. Oil again myrtle, this time, and a careful strigil to erase the barber's conversation from your skin. The unctor complements your umber fold's resilience in humidity. You tip him for his knowledge of textiles and trauma. Back in the palestra, you pretend to stretch and actually take a briefing from your steward, who has infiltrated the baths under the respectable cover of sanity. Accounts from your latifundia have landed, Olive's cooperative, Vine's theatrical. The bailiff in Campania needs a letter that says no in 6 different ways. A publicanist tax contractor has written from Bithynia offering a share in a road toll lease. Your steward recommends the road and not the man. A governor not yours has sent a circular that reads like both a request for advice and a confession. You promise to draft something that sounds like neither. You will write it at dusk when lamps and honesty smell the same. A young scribe your house's quick hand slides in with a copy of the senatorial consultum cleaned up for the herald. He reads the key clause. You nod and add the piety. Garnish your ally suggested salus populi, because nothing says relax like the ablative of cause on good parchment. He blots with sand. The letters drink decorously. Quirky tidbit flutters from the ceiling. More than one bath wall bears graffiti, cursing thieves who lifted tunics or rings during the plunge. Some bathers scratched little defiction's cursed tablets, naming whoever stole my cloak and inviting gods to arrange itching and insomnia until the cloak returned. Whether the gods run a lost and found is unclear. The capsarius's tip jar, however, is very effective. You accept a fig from a friend who swears by fruit Bifurcidarium, nod to a philosopher holding court near the Notaccio and courageously saying nothing at all, and consult your nomenclator who has memorized the face's steaming past. He murmurs, "That's the aedile who owes you a favor. That's the shipowner whose wife is a better listener. That's the advocate who wants you on a bench tomorrow." You schedule 3 words with each. After dinner, tomorrow. Write first while performing an extremely convincing shoulder roll. Mainstream fact drops 1 more tile. Many baths attached libraries or lecture rooms in the imperial age. Caracalla's monstrous complex will someday let you read Homer between a plunge and a pastry. Here, the library is an old man with a good memory. He quotes Cato about brevity, and falls asleep smiling at being useful. You retrieve your toga still present, still pompous, dip the capsorius into loyalty, and let your freedman slide the wool back into authority. Outside, the day has moved 1 finger's width toward afternoon. The rostra is loud again. A herald practices your cleaned-up clause. Joke 2 pats your temple with a cool towel. Congratulations, you have upgraded sweat into policy and crumbs into competence. On the steps, your barber catches you with a final whisper. The tonstrainer heard that the Tribune intends to bring a tiny choir of enthusiastic nodders to tomorrow's Contio. You thank the razor's grapevine, and make a note to borrow 3 applauders who clap in iambics. If politics insists on rhythm, let it at least scan. Your steward falls into step, inventorying the afternoon. A temple stop with the augurs. A household sacrifice to keep the calendar from pouting. A check-in with the pontifices about a roof. Then accounts, letters, and a late stroll past the granaries to make sure promises decided to show up as sacks. The baths have returned your voice to room temperature and your skin to senatorial gloss. The city, reassured that you are clean and briefed, opens a corridor in the heat. Joke 3 smooths your fold. You promise to keep your sentences under the length of a frigidarium breath. The forum says it will believe you when it hears you stop. You walk away from steam shaped like a better version of yourself. Quieter joints, organized pockets of thought, a list that breathes. Behind you the hypocaust continues to persuade water into weather. Ahead, temples, priests, and a calendar that wants attention more than it wants truth. You have oil on your forearms, dust on your sandals, and exactly enough bread in your belly to survive priests, contractors, and the long grammar of afternoon. Temples keep a kind of shade that doesn't belong to tree school rule flavored, like the inside of a good sentence. You step from Bath Brightstone into that shade, and your skin stops narrating how clean it is. The augur you like best waits near a column. Lituus tucked in the crook of his arm like a question mark that graduated. He greets you with the tiny nod priests give to people who keep schedules and illusions simultaneously. We will observe, he says, which in Rome is an action verb. Up on the Capitol line the world arranges itself into templumot, a building but a rectangle of sky. The augur silently draws with his staff. Left becomes east, right becomes west, birds become opinionated. He marks, he watches, he whispers to his assistant, who pretends not to be thrilled and absolutely is. Mainstream fact opens its umbrella. Augury isn't forecasting in the modern sense, its authorization is this action allowed today. The augur divides the heavens, reads auspicia bird flights, lightning, the sacred chicken's appetite, and says yes, no, or try again after lunch. You are very pro after lunch. The bird report, mercifully, is favorable. A right-hand flock behaving like citizens with decent shoes. The augur adds a brisk note about the tripudium, the sacred chicken's crumb-dropping that counts as consent. You thank him the way one thanks a weather app that speaks Latin and statistics. Historians still argue whether augury was a sincere theology or a political technology, a grammar for decision-making that let men say the gods prefer this when they meant the city can stand it. Your inner professor murmurs. Your outer face sticks to gratitude. Birds like humility. Down the slope, the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus wears the day like a crown. A sacrifice is cued for the public good, no drama. Just the city and its calendar keeping each other honest. You join the small file of necessary people and a few unnecessary ones who look necessary on purpose. The Tibetan, a flute player with responsible lungs, warms up in a corner. His job is to drown inauspicious noises, coughs, sneezes, sudden politics so the ritual can hear itself. At the altar, the presiding pontifex lifts his hand and time sits up. You veil your head caput, vela toga, brought forward over hair because Roman gods prefer their worshippers a little mysterious. A victimarius leads in the hostio, this time a clean young pig, and the air gathers a soft seriousness. We will not inventory knives, we will inventory procedures. A prefacio opening prayer makes the space into a sentence. Mola salsa sacred, salted flour, milled and mixed by the Vestal Virgin sprinkles. The animal's head like snow that knows Latin. Wine touches its forehead. The Tibetan lifts a phrase that sounds like a road paved without arguments. You do your part, palms up, words measured. A promise to fulfill the vow if the city gets what it needs and to thank properly either way. Quirky tidbit peeks over the altar rail. If anything went wrong, a stumble. A crack in the cup, a sneeze with political ambitions, the ritual could be piaculamed, repaired with an additional offering. The Tibetan's literal job was to make wrong harder to identify by filling the air. Ancient noise cancelling, now available in Dorian mode. Smoke goes up, which is what smoke does when everything agrees. The Harusbek Zaktruskan expert, morded with gratitude, steps forward afterward for the inspection. But we keep the focus politely high. He says the signs are integri sound in. We accept the verdict like a friendly weather report. Well done, whispers a matron you trust, as if you personally persuaded Jupiter to adopt sensible tastes. After the altar, the pontifices herd you gently toward the calendar corner of the day. The college's archives live like cats in sunlit boxers, fasti inscribed year by year. Legal days dies fasti and divine no-go days nefasti set out in the tidy tyranny of columns. The Pontifex Maximus, older than his robe, younger than his paperwork, asks about the tiny matter of a festival date sliding into a court day next month. You offer the most Roman kind of solution. Put the pious thing early and the lawsuit late. Let both pretend they were always scheduled there. He smiles the smile of a man who has been adjusting time since before breakfast. Mainstream fact flicks your sleeve. Before Julius Caesar's reform, the pontiffs managed the calendar's drift, sometimes for convenience, sometimes for politics, sometimes because the moon and human patience rarely share a watch. Priests could insert days, turning months into negotiations. After Caesar's Julian cleanup, the job became more about remembering than inventing. Still, priests kept the keys to today. Counts, and no, it doesn't. You pause by the Vestal precinct on the way out. Behind lattice and discipline, the sacred fire keeps its smooth whisper. A Vestal passes carrying a covered dish and the atmosphere steps aside. You incline your head with the particular respect Romans reserve for women whose oath outranks everybody's politics. She nods back exactly enough to bless the angle of your day. From there you're tugged politely, by duty toward the Regia. The old royal office reborn as priestly HQ, a file of men with roof on their minds waits. The temple of Castor lost a tile. The pontifices will certify the repairs so no one can call thunder offended if a builder climbs at the wrong hour. You sign a short acta. Craftsmen may work after nona, under the auspices already taken. The city will pretend roofs never leak before noon, if only. A flamen pops into your day like a footnote with a hat the apex, con-shaped cap, decorative, absolute. He is not the high one that Dialis comes with complicated taboos. No horses, no nights out, no knots to naughty to undo. He's flamen martialus, Mars's man. And he needs a procession scheduled for illustration of arms. He lists the route as if roads love him more when he names them. You nod as if roads are listening. Joke 1 rolls past on little wheels. Your calendar app should come with a phone, who bans scheduling anything when your sandals don't feel like it. On the portico you meet the Salitha leaping priests practicing for March. Their month, when they'll dance with the Ancilia sacred shields through the city, singing archaic verses that sound like Rome's childhood. One boy misses a step and recovers with such dignity you want to give him a triumph, for gait alone. Good ankles, you say solemnly, and the magister beams as if you wrote a law. Historians still argue whether the haruspices, those Etruscan experts, held real authority in late Republic in Rome or functioned mainly as consultants who lent prestige to decisions already leaning. Your inner seminar notes, while your outer self writes a quiet recommendation that the city pay them on time like any other specialist. The gods, after all, respect invoices. A brief domestic ritual waits at home. Your steward has arranged a sacrifice at the household lararium, nothing dramatic. Just incense and wine to thank for a small success and to bribe tomorrow into being gentle. You lift the bowl, pour a thin libation into the terracotta dish, and whisper names the way families embroider. Smoke climbs. The house says we see you. A tibason isn't required here. Your dog's snore does the job of drowning ill-omened noises with dignity. Quirky tidbit slides in with a wink. Some houses set a bell near the lararium. A child rings it before nightly prayers to tell the Lares their audience has arrived. Whether the gods appreciate doorbells is unknown, but children absolutely do. You ring it once because good habits like practice. Back out. The Edile meets you on the forums, sunny edge to review stall permits for tomorrow's Contio crowd bridge building between religion and bread. He worries about vendors shouting over the tribune. You suggest the Tibuson effect. Hire 2 flute players to play softly near the rostra while the tribune speaks. Call it piety. Enjoy the quiet. The Edile looks at you like you just invented trousers. You detour to the temple of Castor and Pollux for a short vow about your portico stone. The Ediles show you a sample tile blessed by 3 different guilds. You pick the one that looks honest when dusty. The priest writes its name on a tablet as if stone notices. You pretend it does, because your building schedule relies on rock having feelings. Mainstream fact takes your elbow. Priesthoods in Rome were offices with politics colleges of pontifices, augurs quindecimbri, sacris faciendis keepers of Sibylline books, each with a cooptatio process that looked suspiciously like elections. Senators often doubled as priests. Rights and policy braided. Your morning grain claws tasted better after incense. Your afternoon repairs smell better with a prayer pinned to them. The sun has edged past Nona. A herald is setting up for the edict reading you helped polish. The tribune is rehearsing sincerity at a reflective bronze. Your nomenclator whispers the names of 3 people who want you to witness a little contract with the gods. A couple promising cakes if a baby sleeps. A guild vowing garlands if the market behaves. A shipowner promising an offering if the harbor welcomes him with non-dramatic waves. You nod, because repetition is devotion's mother. Joke 2 peeks from under your fold. You consider founding a tiny household cult to complete a checklist daily incense for tasks that behave and a stern prayer to tomorrow when they don't. Last stop, the Era Maxima of Hercules near the cattle market, where a friendly priest is plating a do you te die give so that you give, on a marble surface that has known more promises than benches no size. He asks whether a senator might bless the distribution of meat for the poor after the rite. And you agree because bread tomorrow and meat today feel like a city doing the math of kindness. You keep your words small and warm and let Hercules take the heavy lifting of symbolism. Historians still argue whether Rome's religion was primarily contractual gift for gift or deeply effective network of relationships with gods who had personalities and preferences. Your inner guide says, while your hand rests for a second on warm stone, you decide not to decide. Contract or affection. The city breathes easier when incense turns errands into vows. Evening slides its first cool finger across the forum. The Tiburon reheats his tune for tomorrow. The Vestal flame keeps its even hum. The augur packs his staff like punctuation done for the day. You head home through shade that smells faintly of bay and decisions, careful not to spill incense across your schedule, carrying the memory of ritual like a quiet weight that made the rest of your errands stand straighter. Joke 3 stretches beside your ankle. You promise to keep a Tiburon in your pocket for meetings that need helpful music. Your toga pockets remind you they are imaginary, and the gods nod in agreement. The shade from Jupiter's steps still rides your shoulders when you slip back into the tablinum, that long, cool room where money pretends to be quiet. The shutters sit half-closed like eyelids at vespers. A strong box with iron corners lurks against the wall. A polished abacus waits with its little bronze counterscalcula lined like obedient beetles. Your steward has arrayed today's battlefield. Stacked wax tablets, tied with cord. A pewter cup of sand for blotting. Your signet ring warming in a dish so the beeswax will take its bite. The dog sighs under the desk, as if he, too, has opinions on cash flow. You start with the latifundior, faraway acres that dream in olives and grain. The Villicus in Campania has written the kind of letter that wears a tunic of apologies, to presses down. One almost mended. The bailiff requests permission to buy a clever mechanic and not a clever priest. Because wrenches solve more theology than prayers. The Villica, his wife, adds a line in a smaller, tidier hand about storage jars and the need for more pitch in the lining lest the oil learn to climb out on its own legs. You run a finger along the tally, amphory filled, amphory promised to a shipper who swore his hull is braver than winter. Amphory set aside for your household so the cook can stop watering his philosophy. Mainstream fact taps the table. By late Republic, many senatorial fortunes sprawled through latifundia large estates, managed by a villicus and workforce of slaves and tenants. Senators kept a minimum fortune, 1,000,000 sesterti, and, after the Lex Claudia 218 BCE, were supposed to avoid large seagoing ships, which is Rome's way of saying invest, but don't look like a merchant. You do the dance as taught, no big holes in your name, but plenty of contracts with people whose holes are very enthusiastic. A freedman accountant reads the Campanian numbers aloud in that comforting sing-song of someone who enjoys columns. Olives up 1 part in 10, must fermenting nicely in 2 new vats. Coloni on the back hill asking for lower rent because the stream grew opinions about meandering. You grant a modest reduction with the face that says I am firm and the pen that says I am not cruel. The steward notes repairs to the press, a small bonus for the man who stops leaks, and a polite note in 6 different adverbs to the bailiff's request for new mules with celebrity pedigrees. Quirky tidbit hops out of a side drawer. Amphory leaving your estates will carry titchily picto-painted labels listing contents. Weight, origin, even the names of controllers. Basically a resume on clay. Some houses stamp their jars with little dolphins or palms. Yours uses a sober pinnacone because someone once said it looked honest. You have never met a dishonest pinnacone, so the brand stays. Letters from Publicani tax farm syndicate men with knives made of arithmetic join the pile. The Bithynian consortium pitches you again on a toll road lease you declined in the baths. They sweeten the honey with a share for your freedman. You can almost hear the wink. You tap the counter under interest and ask the steward to route them to an equestrian friend who enjoys making money in public more than you enjoy explaining yourself to censors. Historians still argue whether **** senators routinely circumvented the commerce taboos by acting through freedmen and equities, or whether most kept to the letter and thrived mainly on land. Your inner professor notes, while your outer hand drafts a note heavy on compliments and light on fingerprints. Loans next. The ledger labeled finis smells faintly of bronze and ulcers. You keep a firm ceiling centesima per month is the respectable rate, 1%. Civilized as a haircut, and your steward swears on his abacus that none of your clients confuse the respectable with the enthusiastic. A maritime loan finis, nauticum, lies winking on the page. One of those high-risk, higher-interest instruments where the lender bears loss at sea and the law forgives greed in exchange for courage. You write parvis in the margin, small exposure. Your sleep is worth more than a clever ship. A boy from Ostia drops in with salt on his sandals and a tablet that tastes like the sea. 2 grain ships, under oar, 1 day out, a third patched and hopeful. The prefectus onona grain prefecteds, a courteous gratius for your morning clause. He hopes your patience for shipowners remains retroactive to the moment they appear on the horizon. You reply dryly. Patience terminates at harbor hour clause in wearable Latin and seal the tablet with your ring, while the wax still holds mood. You thumb to urban properties, rents from the Subura Domus and a row of tabernae shops near the Forum. One weaver is late. The steward proposes distrain-sizing a loom to concentrate the mind. You opt for vademonium, a promise to pay by market day because you like looms where they belong, inside and busy. As you initial the line, a memory from the baths wanders in, the graffiti that threatened itchiness to thieves. You almost commission a curse tablet for overdue rent, and then recall that your house policy favors letters over lightning. A governor's letter arrives, puffed up with wax and dust. Boundary dispute calming your stone sentence, did work. Temple roof progress brisk, under auspices you permit yourself a tiny smile, and a paragraph of advice seeking about a city council in his province that keeps trying to hold elections on nefasti days, because it loves spectacle more than calendars. You draft a reply recommending gentle severity. Publish the fasti, shame anyone who pretends not to read, and bribe the tipason to play during speeches until the urge to vote improperly falls asleep. Your steward slides forward the portico file. 3 contractors. 2, trying to look cheaper than marble can be. 1, actually knowing how mortar behaves. You choose competence and ask for a stipulato tomorrow verbal contract with the old rhythm. Dari spondes, spondiodu, you promise to deliver. I promise. The scribe notes a penalty clause modest enough to look honorable and sharp enough to keep carts from daydreaming. Joke 1 lounges over the abacus. You consider renaming your house Ampliatio & Co. Specialists in postponements, reductions, and reasonable naps for numbers. A slave from the estates brings a cloth packet of signet impressions, clay tags pressed with your ring, strung on cords from amphora batches bound for the river. The impressions look like tiny moons bitten by a pino cone. You examine one for cracks. A split can mean light fingers and nod to the steward to log them in the capsa marked Ostia. If a jar goes wandering, a dockhand with a conscience and a knife can send you the tag like a small angry postcard. Mainstream fact sets another tile. Roman bankers Argenterian stalls in the Forum. Changing coin, holding deposits, brokering payments. The state called on mensari in crises to steady credit. Senators mostly dealt through freedmen in their household who specialized in accounts. A good dispensator paymaster was a fortune in sandals. Yours, a quiet man who wipes his stylus before he thinks, asks permission to advance a loan to a promising advocate at duo centesime, for 6 months 2% per month. High but legal, in love with risk. You nod, with the stipulation that the collateral be something that does not float or gossip. Quirky tidbit knocks. Your dispensator keeps a good luck bean in his cash box, a habit picked up from a Chian merchant who swore legumes confuse envy. You have no idea if envy knows botany. You approve the bean. It costs nothing and smells like stew. Historians still argue whether the expansion of latifundia hollowed out Italy's smallholders by the time of the Gracchi, pushing dispossessed farmers into Rome and souring politics, or whether the picture is with regional mosaics of tenancy and stubborn free farms. Your inner seminar murmurs as you approve another small grant for seed to a tenant in Etruria, whose letters always sound like weather reports. You prefer mosaics to catastrophes, but mosaics still need grout. A chirographoma written IOU in duplicate, cut so the jagged edges match weights for your ring. The borrower is that Equites with honest sand on his hem, the one with Sicilian stone. You accept his terms with the caution of a man who respects lava and wind. And the scribe aligns the paper halves so the jagged line proves sincerity. You press your ring, the pinnacone bites, the halves separate like twins, heading in opposite directions with the same story. Your nomenclator drifts in with non-financial news disguised as finance. Claudia's father asked whether his daughter's dowry could be partly land. Your wife suggests cash for ease and jewelry for peace. You decide on a hybrid, because Rome runs on compromise and rings. He also notes that the Tribune's friendly choir has been spotted rehearsing applause near the rostra. You instruct your steward to rent 3 professionals, who clap in iambic, and a 4th who knows how to shush a rumor with a cough. You stand, stretch, and let the numbers fall back into their boxes, like turtles deciding they have done enough. On the way out, you pause at the strong box and lay your palm on the iron. The box is heavy. Your day has been heavier. Still, the city feels lighter now that olives found jars, ships found wind, and paper found words that behave. Joke 2 taps the signet dish. You promise to stop sealing things just because warm wax feels like a tiny victory. You immediately seal a note to your bailiff that says no new mules. The steward catches your sleeve with one last tablet. A charitable fund for funeral expenses of poor client small. Anonymous, replenished from your sportula. Leftovers asks for a top-up. You do it without ceremony. The tablet warms under your ring, and you feel your day add a quiet brick to a wall nobody will take credit for and everybody will lean on. Mainstream fact. One more time. Monthly interest centesima named the rate. Contracts traveled on wax and papyrus. Signatures of rings tied your will to your words. The aerarium kept the city's copies under keys the gods respected because men guarded them. All of which is a gentle way of saying that paperwork is the Republic's second army. You stack the tablets, return the ring to its dish, and let the dog lead you toward the door as if bread and crowds are next which. If you've been listening to your own schedule, there. Joke 3 walks at your ankle like a small accountant. You promise that when you dream tonight, numerals will be sheep. If they insist on being sesterdii, you will count them anyway, and wake richer in yawns. You step back into the corridor, the house cooler than the forum, and smarter than your plans. Outside, a runner thumps past with the edict posting for tomorrow's conteo. From the Subura, you catch the smell of bread testing crusts. You tuck the day's last amplier space for errand to your pocketless toga, and head for the part of afternoon where public favor gets its ration of attention, along with its ration of grain. You let the tablinum's numbers close their eyes and steer your feet toward the Horia. Because reputation eats logistics for prondium. The sun has softened enough to make the river look like a long, patient promise. Grain dust clouds the warehouse doorway in a polite halo. A clerk coughs the way papyrus coughs softly, as if not to disturb totals. You pinch a kernel, bite it like a jeweler testing a coin, and nod. Tripolitanian, not bad, not great, but bread doesn't need sonnets. The horarius keeper enrolls a tablet with tallies that remember every scoop. Your steward checks weights, your nose checks dampness, your conscience checks whether your morning claws will look like foresight when the ovens wake. Mainstream fact carries a steady basket. Since Gaius Gracchus's Lex Frumentaria 123 BCE, Rome has entertained the notion of subsidized grain for citizens. By Claudius's day 58 BCE, some distributions ran free. Later, emperors sculpted the unknowna into an institution. In the late Republic, aediles and special commissioners' Curia unknown is scrambled by grain abroad. Smoothprices.com cues. You're part of the scramble. The city likes its bread quiet. A runner from Ostia arrives with dried salt on his hems and very wet news. 2 ships sighted in the harbor mouth. Oars chewing daylight. Captains swearing the Tiber has never looked so attractive. You draft a quick rescript to the Horia master's measure. Neat. Stack high. Post numbers and, to the edilants, don't brag. Anxiety eats adjectives. Seal with pinnacone. Send with a boy who runs like he's late for fame. On the forum, a small contio rehearses itself. A herald tests vowels in the direction of the rostra. Your friendly tribune tries on sincerity like a new cloak. The aedile steward of markets and game sidles up, with the shy swagger of a man who knows. Rome remembers spectacles and grain in the same drawer. He needs you to look at a program. A morning of beast parades will keep the teeth politely off stage. Afternoon races in the circus. A bonus day of theater for people who came to argue about metaphors. You hold the tablet like a menu and order 2 more flute players and a chorus for transitions. So the crowd has less time to invent politics between acts. Quirky tidbit climbs onto the clipboard. Seating at shows comes with tessery little tokens printed with section and row. Ushers herd citizens by order and habit. Senators front and center. Equities holding their 14 rows, thank you. Lex Rostia Theatralis. 67 BCE. The rest sorted by geography, velocity, and optimism. Aediles sometimes ban cushion hoarding and rope off aisles when ambition tries to save seats with cloaks the size of provinces. You recommend extra ushers with shoulders trained in diplomacy. You walk the edge of the Horia Galba big brick stomachs with names while the unknown men chalk. Figures on door lintels. Sacks in, sacks out. Yesterday's lies corrected. A woman with 3 kids and the patience of a vestal without a fire asks a simple question. When? You answer with a time that is not a promise and not a rumor. She nods. A professional reader of weather. Your steward tacks a note on the granary wall. Tokens distributed at prima light. Queue forms along the portico. No elbows. No poetry. Joke 1 tilts your fold. You consider paying a poet to write no elbows in hexameter to improve compliance. The aedile shifts to games proper. He asks, full eager if you will sponsor 2 races, or a set of stage prizes, so his budget looks like piety, and not arithmetic. You could fund Ludi without holding the office. Republican euergetism, private generosity in public, keeps stones polished and reputations sticky. You choose theater prizes safer than chariot politics and a shadecloth film. For the afternoon sun over seats where older necks keep votes. The aedile promises to announce your gift like a rumor that likes you. Mainstream fact leans on the circus gate. By the late Republic, the factionists reds, whites, blues, greens already spark loyalties. Circus Maximus houses their thunder. The Pampa Circenses procession leads in with music, images of gods, silk of borrowed sky. A lap counter 7 dolphins. 7 eggsdrops markers for each circuit. The crowd roars in plurals. You do not choose a faction out loud, but your servant is absolutely wearing blue sandals under his decency. Historians still argue whether bread and games were cynical control or a negotiated civic contract. Whether crowds were soothed or genuinely engaged in a shared ritual of belonging. Your inner professor whispers while your outer hand signs for 10. Baskets of Massilia small gifts to throw into the crowd between acts, nuts, dates, even little coins tucked into ribbons. You remind the aedile to aim at people who look like they came for bread and stayed for respect. You pace the circus in your head as the architect shows you a plan for shade. Vela ropes from poles to outer cornice, anchored by men who know knots like relatives. We can tint the cloth, he says, so the light looks like saffron without smelling like it. You prefer plain. Rome can handle its color without fancy filters on a weekday. He bows to your taste and your purse. On the theater side, a poet auditions a few lines from tomorrow's comedy. He is witty in a way that lightly consults censors before speaking. The Karagiscore's manager wants extra coin for masks and shawls. You grant enough to remove visible poverty from the costumes. In the back, a group of professional applauders plausers rhythms. You recognize your rented iambic clappers and the cougher who can silence a rumor like a small, kind thunder. You tip in advance. Good weather deserves prepayment. A woman from the Baker's Collegium presents a problem in excellent grammar. Ovens are hot, flour is ready, but millstones have opinions about bearings. You send a boy to the fuller's to borrow grease that doesn't smell like a scandal and ask the edile to assign 2 carpenters with wrists smarter than your budget. She bows and, in parting, slips you the smallest roll in Rome, warm as agreement. You invent the custom of senatorial bite a ceremonial nibble to bless the batch and announce it loudly enough to become precedent. Corky tidbit waltzes by. At some shows, a Sparcio, a light sprinkling, mists the crowd with rosewater or throws perfumed petals. In hot seasons, the villa above tint the light, making faces look like stories. Whether the Republic did it often or the emperors turned it up to 11, noses remember courtesy longer than ears remember speeches. You approve a few sprigs of myrtle crushed in water for the front rows and let the rest of the city smell like itself. On a side street, a corndole queue forms practice spirals. The tesserie frumentaria grain tokens clack, like civics in pockets. A scriber chalks a list on a board. A boy with shoulders bigger than his appetite guards the front with a staff and a look he borrowed from a lictor. You nod at the order. Decency painted on the DN station. One of your freedmen to quietly move anyone infirm to the top without turning mercy into a show. Historians still argue whether citizen lists for grain were a stable roster or a drawstring. Bag names slipping in and out with migration, fraud, and reform, and whether the urban plebs were one class or a patchwork of trades and tenancies. Your inner guide notes. The faces here look like patchwork stitched by bread. Laundresses next to porters. Clerks next to veterans. Laughter next to arithmetic. You save 10 minutes for the crowd itself. The rostra gives you a step. Your voice uses indoor volume. You promise nothing you can't invoice. You praise the bakers by name, 3 of them. Names like F. Thank the shipowners for remembering which way is a priver, and tell a child near the front that the dolphins at the circus will swim faster if he sleeps early. The laugh is small, which is perfect. Small laughs are sturdier than applause. Joke 2 saunters through with a palm up. Tomorrow you'll toss Massilia and call it generosity. Tonight you'll toss coin at your steward and call it planning. Economy is just generosity with a spreadsheet. Your nomenclator returns with a whisper. The Tribune's choir now includes a man whose palms are famous. The equities box wants confirmation that the 14 rows will be guarded from enthusiastic cousins. One of your clients volunteers as usher. A job at which he will excel because he has practiced hurting you. You approve the whole constellation. Then send a note to the edile. Post a short edict against seat saving by cloak, cushion, or cousin. Read it with 2 flutes to make the law sing. As the sun leans, you take a last tour of the Curia. Sacks stack like arguments that will behave. Labels show weights that do not insult intelligence. The prefect's runner thanks you with a bow, phrased as future competence. You point at a broken scale. A boy runs, returns with a wedge, and stops the plate from lying. The smallest fix earns the day's largest satisfaction because shelves don't applaud, and that's the point. Mainstream fact settles the scene. Ediles staged, ludi romani, plebe, rich men funded extra munera, and shows to polish names. The circus and theaters were Rome's ritually scheduled breathing, measurable as calendars. You inhabit that breath now, not as architect of joy but as a man who knows joy needs rope, shade, chalk, water, and sometimes a coffer with excellent timing. Joke 3 taps your sandal. You promise to cheer for everyone tomorrow to stay neutral. Your heart buys a cheap blue ribbon at a stall and tucks it invisibly into your toga, which is an acceptable level of hypocrisy in a city this large. By twilight, the tesserie are stacked in baskets, the villa folded like obedient sky. The bakers know when to begin. and the herald has rehearsed the word today until it sounds like a favor. You turn toward home through streets that smell of warm flour and pine resin, thinking of the crowd not as a beast to manage but as a choir to tune. Give them bread on time, shade in season, stories with endings, and the gift of being counted. The river hums its long, low approval. You breathe with it, in time for lamps to bloom and for dinner to become the day's last stage. You inherit the late afternoon like a toolkit, chalk for lines, string for straight, patience for everything else. The Committee on Works gathers under the Basilica Aemilia, where shade makes men think in straight edges. An agrimensor surveyor sort, hat like a practical decision, has set up his gramma. That cross of arms and plumb lines that convinces Earth to sit up in a line. He nods at you with the serene vanity of a person who can make horizons behave. Beside him wait a contractor with mortar under his nails, a scribe with wax that smells like arithmetic, and a quester checking that the purse will outlast the promises. You've agreed to review a stretch of road and a sulking aqueduct in one afternoon. Stone above, stone below, water learning ambition between them. First stop is the road, a run of basalt paving that thinks it's eternal until carts explain otherwise. A millenarium milestone lies on a cart like a sleeping column, letters chalked for carving. Your name, the year by consuls, the verb reficit. The stonecutter asks whether you prefer AED or AEDIL in the line about funding. You choose the shorter because monuments should be modest and also because carving is expensive. Mainstream fact, stray. And the same busy man started the Aqua Apiorode and water beginning on the same page of the city's biography. Milestones stood like polite witnesses every mil pasos, 1,000 paces counting distance from the city and the time between promises. The agrimensor sights along his plumb lines, calls to Sempa 10-foot measuring Rodin boys trot the poles forward with the solemnity of priests. He explains the camber that kisses rain toward ditches, the Stadamen foundation stones, rudis and summum dorsum the top. You test the edge with a sandal. The paving fits your foot like a verdict. Historians still argue whether the great VA outside Italy were predominantly fully paved with stone or often metalled with compacted gravel, except at hard-wearing points. Your inner professor murmurs, while your outer face settles on the obvious. The part you pay for today should neither drown in winter nor melt under wheels in August. A muleteer complains about ruts that memorize bad drivers. The contractor gestures to iron tires and shrugs in a language made of wrists. You order patching where the ruts, try to think for everyone, and a line of milestones set properly vertical, not leaning like lazy senators. Quirky tidbit jogs beside the cart, on Terminalia. Late February's Festival of Terminus, some surveyors leave a ribbon at boundary stones. Sing 2 lines to a god who likes property lines more than poetry, and pour a spoon of wine on the grass. Your agrimensor pretends not to know songs. The chalk on his fingers says he absolutely does. The aqueduct sulks a mile away, where a minor arcade steps across a low valley like a patient animal. Up close you hear water in the covered spicista, channel argue with lime scale. A castellum devasorium, the distribution tanquets at the edge of town like a round, serious thought. Inside, outlets lead to fistulae lead pipes stamped with names so the water knows who owns its politeness. The waterman, hair wet, without having bathed, explains that the gradient has grown timid where silt learned to settle. The pozzolana volcanic ash mortar is sound, but the sluice wants bribes in the form of maintenance. Mainstream fact taps the arch with a knuckle. By your period, Aqua Apia, Anio Vitus, Aqua Marcia, and Aqua Tepula already lace Rome. Agrippa will eventually add more and act as curator aquarum with vigor. Aqueducts run mostly by gravity, dipping and stepping for miles, sometimes using inverted siphons across tricky valleys. Near the city, they climb into glorious arcades so people can admire what their throats enjoy. You examine the inside of the castellanthan sheen of calcium, like a teacup that needed a better rinse, and pronounce the policy you practiced in steam earlier: clean, don't replace. The contractor brightens. Replacement smells like lawsuits. The committee scribbles. The scribe scratches X's enitus C on solto, by decree of the Senatontu a draft titulus for the aqueduct's repair and your portico's name, which you still pretend was an accident. A boy with a bucket brings vinegar to soften lime. A worker with a brush turns the chalk white back into water's preferred geometry. You ask for one more overflow spout so the castellum can throw tantrums without flooding neighbors. The locals clap in the quiet way people clap for drains. You walk the line with the agrimensor, who points out where the spicus goes underground to keep its cool and where it rises to remind everyone that water is cleverer than hills. A farmer tries to sneak a pipe off the line. Your steward coughs, the farmer blushes, and the two negotiate a legal tap with a seal that says, "Don't get creative." Joke 1 strolls along the parapet. You consider installing a tiny tibason in every castellum to drown the sound of illicit chisels. Your treasurer begs you to consider the flute bill. At a bridge, the contractor petitions for a small arch plaque listing his name as well as yours. "So my grandchildren believe I had fingers," he says. You allow a modest line, placed low enough for children to trace with sticky hands. You've learned that memory prefers obsessions you can touch, milestones, inscriptions, grooves in stone left by carts that thought too much. The road committee breaks into subgroups. The pavers arguing with the ditchmen about slope, the stonecutter gently bullying the letterer to carve deeper so weather can't edit names. You arbitrate by lunch habits. Whoever brings bread tomorrow gets their slope within reason. The ditchmen cheer because they always bring bread. The pavers threaten to bring olives the size of principals. At the worksite, you stage the small ceremony of a milestone raising. For men heave the cylinder into its trench. The agrimensor checks plumb. A boy stabilizes with wedges. You drop 3 coins at the base knot because you're superstitious. Merely because you like workers to find surprises in their day. The stone settles its feet in dirt, and suddenly the road looks like a sentence with punctuation again. You read the wet letters aloud to make them real. Your pinacone ring printed discreetly in the wax of the authorization tablet, nowhere on the stone. The name that stays is Rome's. Historians still argue whether roads were built first for armies or for trade, whether legions paved the empire and merchants kept it oiled, or whether those motives braided from the start, like 2 mules pulling the same cart. Your inner lecturer hands you a fig. Your outer shoes step around a puddle that will be someone's responsibility at sunrise. You prefer braided motives. Soldiers want bread. Bread needs roads. Merchants like safety. Safety likes outposts. Outposts need roads. The map doesn't care why feet move if feet keep moving. Back at the castellum, the waterman suggests a small nympema, public fountain with a pretty face, so housewives have a shorter walk and your dedication has a better echo. You agree to a basin and a spout shaped like something with low bite risk a dolphin, perhaps. The letterer asks whether to add salubritate populi to the health of the people, and you nod, because abletives have been good to you today. Quirky tidbit splashes. Some neighborhoods post a bucket on a chain beside their fountain with the name. Public modesty scratched into the wood so nobody claims an everyday miracle of shared things that don't wander. You detour to a workyard where lime sleeps in domed kilns, sand piles in patient dunes, and rubble waits to be persuaded into opus cumentitium concrete that makes curves for a living. The foreman demonstrates slaking lime water, hissing into powder, a small dragon calmed. He boasts of a pozzolanosaurus that makes mortars cure like law. You sign off on one more cartload, and deny his request for a festival named after him. Joke 2 dusts your sandals. You tell him the festival will be called Well Done Tuesday. He laughs and promises to deserve it. A small committee from a colonia outside the city waits with a map that looks like a fan. They need a bridge repaired where a stream believe it's a river 6 days a year. They've brought a governor's letter, 3 chickens alive, and the kind of politeness that turns the room into a decision. You assign a curator VA in all but name an equestrian, who enjoys Stonehand. Give them a tablet that says use local labor. Send receipts, keep the chickens. They leave relieved and feathered. Near dusk, you walk one last stretch of road where graves line the edges outside the pomerium. As law requires monuments in the shape of houses for names, a mason is resetting an inscription that slid. He mutters that the dead are excellent clients. They never ask for discounts. You drop a coin on a ledge and he pretends not to see it until you're gone. Good manners are the mortar of this city. Your steward catches up with a final schedule. Tomorrow's stipulatio, with the contractor promises in stereo. A visit to check the shadecloth rigging at the circus, and a blessing for the new fountain, nothing elaborate. Just wine and a laurel tied like a thought. You rub dust off your ring, which has earned its pinnacone today, and feel your shoulders shift from worksite to dining room posture. The city's spine looks straighter where you walked. Perhaps that's an illusion. Perhaps illusions are a civic duty. Joke 3 ambles in, grinning like a mule. You vow to stop reading milestones out loud on casual strolls. Your friends vow to stop pretending they don't enjoy it. The road keeps its secrets anyway to ruts. 1 crown, 5,000 feet that weren't yours and still counted. By the time you re-enter the forum's honeylight, the new malarium stands, wet letters drying into memory. The aqueduct hums its approval through clean stone. The castellum clicks softly as water changes levels like a polite bass line. You head for home where the Senna has already begun rehearsing alliances in the kitchen. Bread thinking about platters. Wine thinking about forgiveness. Seats thinking about who will sit in them. You dust your sandals on the threshold, touch the lintel, and promise to leave the city's ropes coiled neatly for morning. Roads with punctuation, water with manners, and your name nowhere it shouldn't be, and exactly where funders are expected to be caught. Home folds around you like a curtain that knows its cue. The osteria swings the door wide. Cool air from the peristyle meets warm kitchen breath halfway, and the house inhales you as if dinner requires you to complete its grammar. In the triclinium, the couches 3 set around a low table have been combed into obedience by the tricliniracia, the master of seating and feelings. Waxed lamps wait like tame constellations, garlands of myrtle nap in bowls. A slave lays napkins mappy with the crisp gravity of law. Your wife intercepts you at the threshold, eyes doing the work of 5 secretaries. We've seated Claudia's father away from his rival, she murmurs, and the man with the roads sits between the baker and a poet, so either the streak gets fixed or it gets a good line. She has placed you where hosts live, beside the middle couch so you can speak to everyone and no one can escape. Mainstream fact pours a quiet cup. Romans dined reclining 3 couches for guests, each with 3 places. The middle couch, the seat of honor. The host often took a place from which he could orchestrate the room. You lean into your senna like a conductor raising a hand. First comes gustatio, the opening course. Mulsum honeyed wine in shallow cups. Eggs with herbs. Olives that remember hills. Lettuce crisp as a decision. From eggs to apples, abovos quiad mala, the old phrase promises structure to the evening. Apostolator cup rare moves like punctuation, keeping everyone's sentences hydrated. You hear the stealthy clink of the crater. The mixing bowl, where wine meets water under the gaze of an arbiter, Bibindi, tonight, chosen by a lucky throw of knuckle bones. He declares a 3-2-1 mix 3 parts water. 1 part when the sensible setting for evenings that need to survive tomorrow. Joke 1 pads in on soft feet. You toy with inventing an arbiter loquendi to dilute certain people's stories to the same ratio. Seating is strategy, masquerading as comfort. On the medial couch you've placed the edelnot too honored. Not neglected between 2 men whose rivalry warms the room but won't ignite the curtains. On the lower couch you tuck the young advocate so your nod can catch him. On the upper, a veteran with an old injury reclines upright with a cushion that lives here for such spines. A poet occupies the seat that makes his metaphors aim toward the baker. The baker beams. Bread loves adjectives. Historians still argue whether women of senatorial households reclined alongside men in the late Republic or typically sat on chairs. The evidence draws a mosaic of habit, occasion, and family law, rather than a decree. Your wife, fluent in mosaics, chooses a low stool, near the host's elbow for the opening course, and a couch for secunda mensa, the sweets. She reads the room and the century at once. The coqua sends a parade that pretends to be modest and carefully fails. Sausages with mustard. Tiny fish baptized in garum the way rumors are. A rustic pottage that tastes like a field made literate. A structor the slicer carves a roast so elegantly you suspect he practices on marble. Napkins, brush fingers. A slave brings finger bowls with lemon and warm water. A second follows with pepper crushed so recently it is still dreaming of vines. Quirky tidbit lays a napkin in your ear. Some guests bring their own napkins embroidered with their name not merely to protect tunics, but to wrap leftovers apofferito with a straight face. Satirists complain about thieves disguised as housewives. Your house supplies napkins and overlooks the occasional bulge leaving by the door. Generosity and linen are both part of the budget. The conversation paces itself like a road, local first, then provincial, then gossip if dessert is late. You let the baker report that his millstones now hum like responsible bees. The edile thanks you loudly enough for the neighbors to hear and quietly enough for the censors to ignore. A shipowner confirms 2 grain hulls inside the harbor mouth. You raise your cupsulus populi and everyone sips at the ablative. A freedman slips you a wax tablet with 3 evening updates. The shade cloth ropes past inspection. Your nomenclator has secured 2 plausers with iambic hands and 1 excellent coffer. And the Tribune's Contio will start just late enough to feel important. The arbiter Babendi calls for a toast knot, the gladiator kind, the friend kind, 2 bridges that don't sulk, 2 ovens that choose duty. Cups move, the wine is Falernian watered into citizenship. The water is the Marcia, proud of its long run. Mainstream fact tips its wreath. Wine in Rome was almost always mixed, water civilizing the grape in a big crater. Diners chose an arbiter to set the ratio, sometimes by lot, sometimes by charisma. Between plates you practice your favorite dinner craft, steering talk without looking like a sailor. The edile floats the games. You validate budgets and redirect enthusiasms from exotic beasts toward theater prizes that leave fewer teeth marks. The young advocate tries out a line for tomorrow's bench. You suggest shortening the first half until it can be recited by bread. Your wife asks the roadsman, sweetly, whether his stones prefer rain. He admits they like funding better, and the table laughs like a committee that has eaten. A carver scissor performs a miniature pageant with a fowl, whipping the knife in arcs that make the room applaud and the bird appear in slices that seem mathematical. He bows, uninjured, which is tonight's miracle, and retreats to rearrange another platter as if geometry were delicious. Joke 2 balances a grape on your knuckle. You briefly consider a sumptuary law for showmanship. 1 flourish per falden. Remember Rome already tried to measure dinners by law, and dinners learned to count better. Mainstream fact nods. Sumptuary laws or Chiafania. Didi attempted to limit guests, courses, and cost. Enforcement deserved a medal it never received. Prima mensith of main course makes its case. Boar with dates. Chickpeas dressed like philosophers. Greens that admit they came for color and stay for virtue. A reader in the doorway offers a page from a history, in a voice that favors commas. You wave him to later. Choosing the people at your table over the ghosts in a scroll. A musician slides a soft flute phrase into the edges of sentences. You allow it. A private tibeson is cheaper than arguing over whether a sneeze counted as an omen at dessert. Historians still argue whether every elite center required entertainment's readers, musicians, dancers, or whether many nights were simply talk and food. Your inner essayist notes, as your outer hand signals for secunda mensa. Dessert enters with a change of weather. Apples, figs, nuts. A dish of cheese that tastes like a river told to behave. And a ridiculous but beloved honey cake shaped like a dolphin tomorrow's circus already practicing dessert. Quirky tidbit winks from the fruit bowl. Some swore that rose wreaths or parsley garlands prevented hangovers. Others dabbed myrrh on the head and claimed philosophy. Tonight the wreaths are myrtle moderation's plant and the only philosophy you allow is drink. What still lets you write a letter at midnight? The arbiter agrees, tapping the bowl with a ring like a small, encouraging thunder. Business returns politely. Claudia's father thanks you for the dowry compromise, part land, part cash, part jewelry, with stories and probes whether the clause about inheritance can include her right to manage income. If her husband proves allergic to a basi, you say yes in a sentence so crisp it could garnish fish. Your wife catches your eye and files a compliment for later. The roads man surrenders to a pledge tomorrow at dawn. He meets your agrimensor to argue with ruts. The veteran asks nothing and receives a second cushion. The poet recites 2 lines that make the baker close his eyes. You watch the room learn it likes itself. The conversatio after dinner, drinking threatens to form. You keep it brief. A toss of knucklebones for a prize. The honey cake's tale. A cup past diorum causer. For the gods with a single sip and a wish so general it offends no shrine. The musician folds his tune. The reader gives you a bow and a break. The slaves drift in to refill lamps and erase crumbs with the tenderness of people who know how tomorrow feels. Joke 3 smooths your umbo as you rise. You vow to limit dinner speeches to a frigidarium-length breath. The edile vows to limit tomorrow's clappers to 2 hands each. The room, conspiratorially agrees to test both vows soon, and forgive the failures. The guests leave in the order a good evening chooses. The older first, supported by clever arms. The busy next with tablets to catch. The talkers last, so the street has company. At the door, you press a small apofortuna date wrapped in a leaf into the hand of the boy who carried cups without breaking eye contact with dignity. He looks at the date like a triumphal wreath and bows enough to bless the doorframe. When the last sandal fades, the triclinium exhales. Wine shadows the inside of cups like little eclipses. The lamps take shorter breaths. You stand in the doorway a moment, letting quiet report that nothing exploded and everything aligned. The house has done its portion of politics with plates and pillows. Outside, Rome sews up its day with a bronze needle, the last shop bars dropping. A dog concluding philosophy, the river turning pages in the dark. In the corridor, your nomenclator hands you a short list, 3 thank you notes to dictate. 2 names to move closer at the next dinner. 1 person to avoid seating near garum ever again. Your wife adds that the poet's couplet belongs in tomorrow's cantio. If the Tribune insists on metaphors, you promise to remember. Your secretary appears with wax already warmed. The night shifts from couches to tablets, from mulsum to ink, and you follow, full but alert, because dinner has merely set the agenda. Now you must give it addresses. The lamps come first. 1, 2. Then a tidy row of lucerne, clay mouths sipping oil, their wicks taught to glow like patient commas. The tablinum has changed costumes. The day wore abacus and signatures. Night lays out calamy reed pens trimmed to consequence. A slab of soot-black ink thinned with gum, a drift of sand for blotting, and a neat regiment of wax tablets hinged, dark, ready to take on other people's mornings. You roll your shoulders, which have been wearing Rome since dawn, and sit where sentences feel obedient. Your notarius fastest ear in the house takes his place. He's the one who keeps Tyro's notes in his head, those shorthand hooks and curls born in Cicero's study. Mainstream fact taps the page. Tyronian notes, a system of abbreviated signs, really did speed dictation for orators and officials. He listens with a face that absorbs weather and returns climate. You dictate the first letter in the oldest skeleton you know. Si velis bene est, ego valio f you're well, good. I'm well because form lets meaning stroll instead of sprint. Letter 1. To the prefectus unknown, confirming the grain clause as read from the rostra, praising his ledgers for not panicking, and asking for a post-meridium update when the first sacks thump onto the Curia floor. Your notarius murmurs each sentence back to you in miniature. Like holding up a mirror to your hair, he scratches notes in shorthand into a wax draft, then copies the fair version onto papyrus, the fibers running along the sense. You tilt the sheet to catch lamp glow. Strokes crisp, no ink bleeding into the day that's ending. Letter 2. To Ostia's harbor master, generous in tone, precise in math, with a soft threat disguised as a proverb, stones should move less than men, has already begun its life as a quotation. You let it visit. Letter 3. To the Tribune. A thank you with a ribbon his name will grace the edict. margins plus tomorrow's contio timing, and a polite request that his choir leave the coffer to you. Letter 4. To the Edile, attaching your shadecloth gift like a small cloud on a string. The door muffles a familiar rhythm. The tablerier household couriers line up for packets the way stars form constellations that actually deliver. In late Republican practice, there is no imperial cursus publicus, yet mainstream fact again. That courier network belongs to Augustus and beyond, so your letters travel on human calves, hired mules, and the stubbornness of private systems that never admit to sleeping. Each letter is rolled, tied with string, and sealed with your signet pinnacone, biting wax, a small moon deciding to have a face. Quirky tidbit perches on the seal. A few mischief-loving correspondents write a secret line beneath the top layer of wax and smoke the tablet until the hidden words lift like a shy bruise when warmed. Whether your friends have the patience for such romance is doubtful. Still, your notarius keeps a warm knife handy to re-soften wax gone opinionated. You set the capsaw the cylindrical case where the night dispatch can gulp. Each bundle gets a titulus, a dangling tag with the addressee and a route, via Ostensis River when possible, mule when necessary, boy when nothing else obeys. Your dispensator advances travel money. The runners touch the door lintel for luck, the way you do for habit. And their sandals whisper the sound of promises deciding to become geography. Historians still argue whether senatorial households kept centralized private archives with catalogued armoria and city boy tags on scroll ends or whether most families relied on human memory plus haphazard bundles. Your inner seminar murmurs while your outer hand gestures toward order. In your house, shelves run like sober teeth along the wall, armoria with pigeonholes, rolls bound and labeled, wax tablets stacked by topic, duplicates of Senatus Consulta you helped craft copied for your file, a drawer labeled Fenora loans that hums angrily, a drawer labeled Beneficia favors that purrs. You file the day's consultum copy under a nona, tuck a note beside it, Tribune named, bonus retroactive, release 3 days. You imagine a future antiquarian opening this and sighing contentedly at legible dates. Joke 1 sneaks in with ink on its fingers. You attempt inbox 03 letters left, 2 replies promised, 1 thought that refuses to sit still declare victory anyway, and award yourself a laurel you don't have to wear. Night dislikes being ignored, so you treat it as a colleague. You dictate a commendatio, a recommendation letter. For that young advocate with good lungs, you praise his brevets, a happy lie you intend to make true by nagging and promise to stand behind him tomorrow with both silence and shoulders. You draft a line to a governor who asked about elections on nefasti days. Attach the fasty copy. Underline dies fasty twice. Add a sweetly threatening religion. Abstringimus we bind you by religion and send the packet with a trusted tabularius, whose legs tell time. Your wife steps in with a tray of figs and a single lamp whose light has opinions about warmth. She places a slim tablet on the pile. Claudia's dowry terms, revised per dinner's diplomacy. With a clause that lets her manage income if fortune courts foolishness, you insert the neat clause, ut fructus administrator, licete, and seal it with the pinacone because some sentences deserve bark. In the corner, the capsorious document slave sorts tags and hums. He slides wooden labels onto shelf edges. Voya quia horia theatrand, slides into your awareness a small basket marked to burn, duplicate drafts, blotted copies, things that would embarrass you if found by an enemy with a sense of humor. You burn without nostalgia. Rome loves archives but adores prudence. Quirky tidbit waves from the ashes. Some households burned the trimmings of seals lest forgers practice. Others melted them into a little ball called a sigillum and kept it in a jar like a wax ancestor. The room becomes a chorus of soft sounds, stylus against wax, pen against papyrus, the tiny hiss when a lamp's wick meets a bad thought, the dog's reorganized sigh. You read over the letters to the contractor for tomorrow's stipulatio deri spondis, spondio spelled out in a tidy hand so there is no confusion when speech turns binding. You finish the rescript to the aqueduct men, authorizing vinegar, brushes, and an extra overflow spout. Your pen writes, Salubritate Populi, in a larger script, before remembering humility and shrinking. A final shelf holds personal things that have learned to sit near public. A friend in exile writes from a coast that heals in wounds in equal portions. He asks for a book and news about his garden. You dictate consolatio without theatrics garden first. Always garden and close with a promise to send cuttings wrapped in damp cloth when the next messenger carries more than words. Your notarius looks up, surprised by gentleness. You nod back with the face that says policy begins where friendship refuses to leave. Mainstream fact steps out of the shadow. Roman letters liked formulae. Openings with veil and closings with Curia utivelius. Little kiss words like salutum and cura. Seals held identity. Rings held seals. And the back of a stylus, the flat spatula end was an eraser before the world learned rubber. You turn a tablet around and smooth a sentence you regret. The wax receiving your change as if the day had also offered to edit itself. Historians still argue whether senators habitually penned their letters by hand or dictated most to slaves and freedmen. The surviving hands on papyri show both possibilities braided by habit, time, and pride. Tonight you dictate the important, scribble the kind, and handwrite the dangerous on. The theory that your own script travels with more caution. The tabellori return in waves for their bundles. One takes the Tiber by boat, hugging the bank's dark syllables. One takes the Via Ostensis with a mule that knows harder Latin than it should. One trots only as far as the aedile's house 2 streets over. Because proximity is also a journey. You press small tokens into calloused palms, a coin here, a date there, an extra cloak pin for the boy who runs cold. They go, dipping into the city like oars. The threshold remembers the weight of decisions turned into errands. Joke to eyes your signet. You swear you'll stop sealing memos to yourself just because biteable wax is satisfying. 5 minutes later you seal a note that says stop sealing notes and laugh in low Latin. The last administrative act is the archive walk. You move along armaria, labeled with past campaigns, old censuses. Notes from trials where your ampliatio bought time that turned into justice, and patronage lists with checkmarks like quiet rain. You pause at a shelf of Senatus Consulta copies, run a finger down the cold edge of a year when the benches felt kinder, and remind yourself that paperwork is not history until somebody's breath reads it out loud. Your nomenclator appears with an evening face and 2 names you need to dream about, the province being whispered in connection with your next command, and the man whose scandal will not quite decide to happen or not. Tomorrow, you tell both names, feeling how tomorrow has already begun under your ribs. He bows and leaves a lamp by the door, like a seal on the dark. You blow out all but one light. Your hand smells faintly of ink, wax, and the myrtle your wife set near the tray. The house quiets into those long, responsible silences that keep walls standing. From outside, the city sends a last dispatch of sound, a cart correcting a wheel. A drunk negotiating plural nouns, a herald rehearsing today one more time to make sure it will fit in tomorrow's mouth. Joke 3 tugs at your sleeve. You promise to stop composing an entire policy in the salutation of your letters. Your notarius promises to stop catching you doing it. You both fail gently and decide to call it style. You gather the remaining tablets Claudia's dowry. The contractor's promise. The aqueduct note-hand set them on the edge of the desk where morning can't pretend not to see them. The last lamp spans a golden bridge between the day you managed and the night you will let manage you. You leave the palm brushing the cool doorpost as if it were a colleague's shoulder, and walk toward a room that has been practicing quiet since afternoon. Tomorrow holds commands, exiles, and the soft arithmetic of not getting caught in other people's storms. Tonight holds one final breath, and a bed that knows how to file you underdone for now. You leave the last lamp burning in the corridor and stand a moment, where the house stops being public, and the night starts doing its quiet engineering. The nomenclator's 2 names keep drifting back, province and scandal. Like shy fish that want you to pretend you're not watching. You oblige, because pretending is one of Rome's favorite virtues. Still, The mind packs when it isn't told to unpack. You listen to your own thoughts fold scrolls into a traveling chest and count lictors as if they were sheep. If tomorrow favors you, a year from now you could be practicing Imperium on roads that pronounce S like Winduscia, Sicilia, Hispania, or something harder, all hills and nouns. Mainstream fact strolls in with its sandals tied, after a consulship or praetorship. Men often took provincial commands as proconsuls or propraetors, assigned at least in theory, by a formal lot drawing supervised like it mattered, and sometimes it did. There you publish your edictum provincial, a governor's house rules copied from the urban praetor's edict and sanded for local weather. You circuit the conventus towns, convene courts and their porticos, balance publicani arithmetic with the patience of a scale, and write letters that have to cross hills before they cross minds. Historians still argue whether late, Republican provincial assignments truly rested on lot or on extra sortum deals, negotiated exceptions that reshuffled maps with a handshake and a wink. Your inner seminar says, dry as a road in August. You remember faces in the Curia who never draw the province they accidentally preferred. You remember others who take what the bowl spits out and make it hospitable by force of secretaries. You privately hope for a map with harbors because you like the sound of ropes and minimal legions. Because your patience has a polite allergy to tents. Your traveling edict begins writing itself inside your head. Fair interest caps. Hearings scheduled on days that do not insult Jupiter. Torture forbidden for citizens. This sentence takes up more room than others. You leave it there on purpose. Grain levies measured by something other than rumor. Roads repaired by men who own hammers. You will bring a quester with numbers, where the bone is. Choose legati, who can read faces and weather, and a doctor, because humility is cheaper than fever. The house lends a prop, and you try on the old, ceremonial axes for fit those fasces outside the pomerium, where blades are allowed to remember they once existed. It's theater, yes, but theater that opens gates. In provinces, Imperium needs to look like more than a suggestion. You picture the lictors again, their measured pace, their unhurried corners, and you sigh with a person's private promise. Axes carried, appetites not. You drift into the room where coats hang and secrets exhale and meet the second. Fish scandal bumping its forehead against the bowl. The Tonstrina rumor was harmless at dinner, but rumors grow bones when lamps go out. Perhaps it's about the warehouse the questors will auction next week. Perhaps a publicaness who wishes your handwriting looked more tired. Perhaps someone has decided your sportula is the wrong size for public virtue. You choose the older trick, preemption. 2 lines to the ediles in the morning. Inspect the warehouse before the auction. Post the weights twice. Let the Tibuson play while the bids happen so the audience remembers not to be angry. A short note to the quester. We all like ampliatio in court. We loathe it in ledgers. Quirky tidbit slides a little drawer open and shows you a thing you always forget. In the East, petitioners will write requests on astracopatchards because papyrus is a delicacy and clay is democracy. You will leave a basket on a table marked shards here and learn to read other people's crockery. You smile. You've always liked the honesty of broken things that refuse to be useless. The sea joins your thinking, because seas own governors the way roads own mules. There's a season for sailing and a season for stories. Mare Clausum, the winter months when captains point at the sky and declare no, roughly when your breath hovers and wives keep lamps trained on the door. You rehearse the calendar, taste the wind in your mouth. Tell your steward in absentia to buy a portable sundial, a strigil, and a cook who can persuade unfamiliar fish to confess. The sundial is vanity. You know half of them tell time to whoever designed them, and not to the place they end up, but a bit of sun-caught in bronze looks like confidence on a governor's table. You do one more circuit through the house, a slow patrol to feel your day from the outside. At the Lararium, the smoke is thin and behaving. The little Larrys wear their clay smiles. You add a grain of incense that says elsewhere may happen. Let me not embarrass here. At the door, the porter shows you a small tessera, someone slipped under the laccia token cut with the outline of a dolphin and a single letter on one side. You turn it twice, feel the message you're supposed to invent, and decide to like it as an omen with no job yet. Back in your study, you unwrap the exile letter, the friend on the seacoast with the fine hand and the dog that, he says, has learned new verbs like wait. You think of exile as the Republic's soft escape hatch. Walk out before the verdict. Move your body to save the name. Settle in Massilia, or Rhodes where the air tutors humility, and the gossip speaks with an accent. Historians still argue whether most late Republican exiles were legal penalties or voluntary flights to sidestep confiscations and vote loss. Your inner professor murmurs. Either way, the friend writes that the sea teaches nouns rock, salt light, and persuades adjectives to stay modest. You underline rock and promise yourself you will send cuttings even if you never go. You sit. You let the room take your weight the way a forum takes a sentence. Your to-do list for a hypothetical province is its own little senatus consultum. Find a scribe who knows Greek, a herald who can sing a decree without sounding like a threat, a translator for manners. Bring extra seals so petitions are acknowledged with a click. Pack patience, pumice, and a second pair of sandals. Label one chest, courtesy, and fill it with tomorrow. Joke one wanders in yawning. You pencil exile blockers on your calendar between Contio and shadecloth, as if a red line can keep gossip from discovering legs. It makes you laugh, which is something no decree did today. Down the hall, a lamp coughs and steadies. Your wife appears framed by a line of sleep and says, without punctuation, water is already hot tomorrow. The Plausers know their rhythms. And I told the baker to aim his rolls at your rival's bench so generosity and gravity can coordinate. You express gracious in exactly the register that earns you breakfast. She adds, softer, that 2 clients came by with news. The man with the dye vats found a cheaper tax, and the widow's girl smiled the way girls do when futures become desks instead of storms. The house feels suddenly heavy with the kind of light that only domestic sentences produce. You go to the window that knows the Capitoline silhouette and lean your arm on the cool stone. The city is practicing being asleep. It's a rehearsal that never opens, a permanent preview where nothing goes wrong because nothing needs to go right. You think of the Tribune's face when he decided not to use a veto he now owns like a savings account. You think of the stones set upright, the castellum cleaned, the dolphin spout you accidentally named. You think of the sentence that wrote itself into law today, and the grain already turning from problem into bread. Inside the Curia, while night keeps an eye on scales, Joke 2 pulls a cushion to your elbows and speaks for the dog. Your umber managed to behave all day. Try not to ruin it on a doorframe on the way to bed. You obey. Doors like obedience. Near the threshold, the nomenclator has left a final asterisk on a wax tablet. Remember to be provincial before you are provincial. Walk slower. Listen longer, name fewer things, and write one less letter than you want to. You rub your thumb across the star and leave the wax believing it has been seen. From the courtyard, the fountain repeats a small idea until it becomes advice. Fall, settle, shine, again and again, without ever insisting on applause. One last superstition more, a habit dressed up for temple. You touch the lintel and send a civil note to tomorrow's feet. You will meet the crowd. You will feed the dogs. You will pretend fortune is a colleague and not a weather pattern. You draw a line between scandal and story, another between province and home, and leave both lines unguarded because sleep guards better. Joke 3 laces your sandals together gently. Metaphorically, if you do wake at night counting lictors, allow yourself to count granary sacks instead. The first is a rumor, the second is a ratio, and either way you will run out before you run out of breath. The lamp by the bed does what good lamps do, turns the room into a promise instead of a demand. You slide under linen that remembers the summer's breath and winter's grammar. Feel your shoulder blades relax into the mattress like 2 reasonable votes, and let the city fold you like a toga that knows its shelf. The night leans, and the room obliges. Shadows lengthen into friendly hallways. The curtain forgets to move. The last lamp lowers its voice until the flame is a small, patient bead. Outside, Rome keeps breathing, but softly now water, tucking itself along the bank. A cart lifting and setting down the same wheel as if it's practicing. A distant dog, reconsidering an opinion, and letting it go. You let your own thoughts slow to the pace of a man walking a cool corridor with his hand grazing the wall. The day's nouns grow comfortable and unhurried. Stone, grain, letter, road, roof. Each one tilts on its side, and becomes a place to sit. Even the more complicated ones tribune, rumor, province decide to be quieter shapes for a while, like coats waiting on pegs, content to hang, content to rest. Breath finds its long, even measure. In, with the soft smell of warm oil faded now to clean linen. Out, with the small release of a hinge closing politely. The house joins you, settling a beam here, easing a door there. Consenting to the truth that nothing urgent needs you for the length of a good sleep. If a thought returns, let it place it beside the fountain and watch it take on that gentle rhythm fall, settle, shinened, then soften until it is only water again. The window holds a slice of sky where a star has discovered the rules of whispering. You do not need to be governor of anything in this moment. You do not need to be patron, senator, architect, guest, or host. You may be a person whose hands are calm and whose eyes have earned their closing. Allow the last edges to blur, the outline of the writing desk, the simple square of the door, the neat curve of your signet in its dish. Everything will remember itself in the morning. For now, permission is granted to drift, to drowse, to drop down into quiet where even the city agrees to speak less and listen more. Sleep takes the sentence, folds it neatly, and sets it by your pillow.